The woman they tried to bury is about to walk into a room full of people who destroyed her. Lena Carter's hands shake as she holds an invitation that shouldn't exist. A summons from Adrian Vale, the man whose empire she exposed, the man who watched her fall and did nothing. Tonight, she'll face the people who crushed her career, stole her credibility, and made her disappear. They think she's broken. They think she'll cower. But Lena didn't survive 3 years of invisibility just to play it safe now. This is a story about a woman who refuses to stay buried. Stay until the end. Hit that like button. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Lena Carter stared at the heavy cardstock, cream-colored with gold embossing so precise it caught the afternoon light slanting through her apartment window. Her name, Ms. Lena Carter, written in calligraphy that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She should have thrown it away immediately. Instead, she set it on her kitchen counter and spent the next 48 hours pretending it didn't exist while simultaneously being unable to think about anything else. "You're not actually considering this," Marissa said, perched on Lena's worn couch with a glass of wine that was definitely too expensive for a Wednesday evening. "Tell me you're not actually considering this." Lena didn't answer. She was standing at her window, looking out at the city skyline, a view she'd once had from the 42nd floor of the Garrison Financial Building, back when her office had floor-to-ceiling windows and her opinion had mattered. Now she lived in a fourth-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where the bodega downstairs sold lottery tickets and dreams in equal measure. "Lena, I heard you." "Then answer me. You cannot be thinking about going to this thing." Marissa had been her assistant once, back when Lena had assistants. Now Marissa worked in marketing for a tech startup and met Lena for wine every Wednesday because some friendships survived professional disasters and some didn't, and Marissa was one of the ones that did. "It's the Meridian Gala," Lena said quietly. "Do you know how many people would kill for an invitation? Do you know how many people there will want you dead?" Lena turned from the window. "Dramatic." "Accurate." Marissa set down her wine glass hard enough that the coffee table rattled. "Adrian Vale doesn't send invitations out of the goodness of his heart. The man doesn't have a heart. He has a calculator where normal people keep their feelings. I'm aware of what Adrian Vale has. Then you're aware this is a setup, a trap, a very expensive, very public trap designed to what? Humiliate you? Finish what they started 3 years ago? 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. But who was counting?" Lena picked up the invitation again. The Meridian Gala. Black tie. The Ashford Estate. A charity event that was less about charity and more about showing the city exactly where you stood in the hierarchy of people who mattered. She'd gone once, years ago, back when Jonathan had been her mentor and she'd been the rising star everyone whispered about. The analyst who could spot corruption in a balance sheet the way some people spotted constellations. That was before she'd spotted corruption in the wrong balance sheet, before she'd discovered that Garrison Financial wasn't just managing portfolios. They were laundering money for clients who made their fortunes in ways that didn't appear on tax returns. Before she'd gone to Jonathan with evidence, trusting him to do the right thing. Before she'd learned that Jonathan had known all along. The official story was that Lena had fabricated evidence to cover her own mistakes. That she'd been involved in the scheme and tried to pin it on innocent people when she got caught. The unofficial story, the one that circulated in whispers and knowing glances, was worse. That she was unstable, vindictive, a woman who couldn't handle the pressure and lashed out at the people trying to help her. Neither story was true, but truth had turned out to be negotiable when you were 28 and fighting against men with 40 years of credibility and unlimited resources. She'd lost everything. Her job. Her reputation, her savings, which had evaporated paying lawyers who ultimately couldn't compete with Garrison's legal team. She'd lost friends, lost opportunities, lost the life she'd spent a decade building. She hadn't lost herself, though. Not entirely. Not yet. "What if it's not a trap?" Lena asked. Marissa laughed, sharp and humorless. "Then it's something worse." "What's worse than a trap?" "I don't know, but Adrian Vale will find it. The man runs half the city's financial infrastructure. He doesn't do anything without 17 contingency plans and a profit margin." Lena knew this. Everyone knew this. Adrian Vale had built his empire on precision and control, on seeing 3 moves ahead while everyone else was still processing move 1. He was 41, never married, rarely photographed, and impossibly wealthy in ways that made other wealthy people look like they were playing Monopoly with fake money. He was also the person whose operation she'd exposed. Not intentionally. She'd been investigating Garrison Financial, tracking money through accounts and offshore holdings, building a case against Jonathan and the senior partners. But the trail had led her somewhere unexpected, to a network of shell companies that filtered money through legitimate businesses, turning dirty cash into clean investments. Those shell companies had belonged to Adrian Vale. She documented everything, every transaction, every connection, every penny that shouldn't have existed. She'd built an airtight case, and she'd taken it to Jonathan, believing he'd help her take it to the authorities. Instead, Jonathan had taken it to Adrian, and Adrian had taken everything from her, or at least, that's what she'd believed for 3 years. That Adrian Vale had orchestrated her destruction, had used his influence to bury her evidence and her career simultaneously, had made sure she'd never work in finance again. But now this. An invitation. Her name in gold calligraphy. A seat at the table she'd been thrown from. Maybe he wants to apologize, Lena said. Marissa choked on her wine. Adrian Vale doesn't apologize. Adrian Vale doesn't even acknowledge mistakes. He just recalculates and moves forward. Then maybe he wants to gloat. He doesn't need a gala for that. He could gloat from his yacht while drinking champagne that costs more than your car. I don't have a car. My point exactly. Lena traced the embossed letters with her finger. The invitation was real. Heavy. Expensive. It existed in her hand, solid and undeniable, and it represented something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Possibility. Or danger. Possibly both. I'm going, she said. Lena. I'm going. She said it louder this time, like volume could transform uncertainty into decision. I'm tired, Marissa. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of walking into rooms and watching people look through me like I'm furniture. I'm tired of being the cautionary tale people whisper about when they want to scare junior analysts into staying quiet. So you're going to walk into a room full of people who destroyed you and what? Prove you're not afraid? Yes. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Probably. Marissa studied her for a long moment, then sighed and refilled both their wine glasses. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Then you're going to need a dress. The thing about falling from grace is that you fall alone, but you land in company. Lena had discovered this in the weeks after the scandal broke, when her phone stopped ringing and her emails went unanswered and the professional network she'd spent years building evaporated like morning fog. She'd felt isolated, uniquely cursed, convinced that no one else could possibly understand what it meant to have your life dismantled by people who smiled while doing it. Then she'd met others. Not many. Not an organized group or support network or anything so official, just people who'd been chewed up by industries that valued profit over principles, who'd spoken up and been silenced, who'd believed in justice and discovered it was negotiable. They met sometimes, informally, at a bar in Brooklyn that didn't ask questions and didn't water down the drinks. They didn't talk about revenge or lawsuits or burning it all down. Mostly they just talked about surviving, about finding work that didn't require references from people who'd never give them, about rebuilding identities that had been shredded by official statements and unofficial whispers. Lena had found work, eventually. Administrative assistant at a nonprofit that provided legal services to people who couldn't afford them. The pay was terrible, and the office was in a building that smelled like old radiators and new mold. But her boss was kind, and the work mattered, and nobody asked about her past, because everyone there had a past they didn't want to discuss. She was good at the job. Organized, efficient, capable of managing chaos with the same skills she'd once used to manage million-dollar portfolios. But it wasn't the same. It couldn't be the same. She'd gone from analyzing financial empires to filing intake forms and answering phones, from shaping economic policy recommendations to scheduling appointments and ordering office supplies. It was honest work, important work. It also made her want to scream sometimes. "You're thinking too loud," Marcus said, sliding into the booth across from her. It was Friday night, 2 days before the gala, and Lena was at the Brooklyn bar with the people who understood. Marcus had been a journalist once, investigating pharmaceutical companies that falsified drug trials. Now he drove for a rideshare company and wrote articles for blogs that paid in exposure instead of money. I got invited to something, Lena said. Something good, or something that will destroy what's left of your sanity. Unclear. She told him about the invitation, about Adrian Vale and the Meridian Gala, and the 3 years of silence that made this sudden contact feel like a message she couldn't decode. Marcus listened, ordered another beer, and finally said, "You think it's a setup." "Marissa thinks it's a setup." "Marissa's smart. What do you think?" Lena turned her glass in slow circles, watching condensation make rings on the wooden table. "I think I don't know what Adrian Vale wants. I think he's spent 3 years pretending I don't exist, and now suddenly I'm worth an invitation to the city's most exclusive event. I think it doesn't make sense. Maybe that's the point, keep you off balance. Or maybe—" She stopped, uncertain how to finish the thought. Maybe what? Maybe he wants to make amends. Marcus didn't laugh like Marissa had. He just looked at her with the kind of patient sadness that came from having your own illusions destroyed. Men like Adrian Vale don't make amends, Lena. They make calculations. Every decision serves a purpose, and the purpose is always their benefit. You sound cynical. I sound experienced. He drained his beer. But you're going anyway, aren't you? I'm going anyway. Why? It was the question she'd been asking herself for 2 days, the one that kept her awake at night, staring at her ceiling and wondering if she was brave or just stupid. Because I'm tired of being erased, she said finally. Because for 3 years I've made myself small and quiet and invisible, and I convinced myself it was strategic, that I was protecting myself, but really, I was just disappearing. And maybe this is a trap. Maybe Adrian Vale wants to humiliate me in front of everyone who already thinks I'm a liar and a fraud. But at least I'll be visible. At least I'll take up space. At least I'll stop acting like I deserve to be invisible. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he raised his empty glass in a mock toast. To being visible. To being visible, Lena echoed, even if it killed her. The dress was a problem. Lena owned exactly 2 dresses suitable for professional events, both purchased during her previous life when networking dinners and client presentations required wardrobes that projected competence and confidence. Neither was appropriate for the Meridian Gala, where black tie meant designer gowns and jewelry that cost more than most people's annual salaries. You could rent something, Marissa suggested, scrolling through her phone. There are services that do high-end rentals for events like this. They were in Lena's apartment again, the day before the gala, surrounded by clothing that had been rejected for various reasons. Too casual, too dated, too obviously cheap, too everything. I can't afford to rent a designer dress. You can't afford not to. You show up in something from a department store clearance rack, and they'll smell blood in the water. Lena sat on her bed, surrounded by inadequate clothing and mounting anxiety. This is a mistake. I should never have decided to do this. Too late now. You already RSVP'd. She had, in fact, RSVP'd. She'd mailed back the response card with her name written carefully, formally, a tiny rebellion against 3 years of making herself forgettable. I don't even know what I'm trying to prove, Lena said. That I still exist? That they didn't break me? That I'm not afraid of Adrian Vale? All of the above? Marissa set down her phone. Look, you want my honest opinion? Not particularly. I think this is either the bravest thing you've ever done or the dumbest, and I genuinely can't tell which. But you've already made the decision, so now the only question is whether you're going to show up looking like you belong there or looking like you're apologizing for existing. I don't apologize for existing. Then prove it. Rent the damn dress. Lena rented the damn dress. It was emerald green silk, with a neckline that was elegant without being conservative, and a fit that suggested she had more confidence than she actually possessed. It cost more to rent for one night than she normally spent on clothing in 6 months, but when she tried it on in her apartment the evening before the gala, she understood why people paid for things like this. The dress didn't just fit, it transformed. Holy hell, Marissa said from the doorway. Lena turned from the mirror, suddenly self-conscious. It's too much. It's perfect. You look like someone who could buy and sell everyone in that room. I can't even buy and sell my own groceries half the time. They don't know that. Marissa circled her slowly, adjusting the fabric, considering angles. You look like the woman you used to be. The one who walked into board meetings and made senior partners nervous. Lena looked at her reflection again. The dress was beautiful, but more than that, it was armor. It said things her voice couldn't, that she belonged, that she mattered, that she refused to be diminished. I'm terrified, she admitted quietly. Good. Fear means you're paying attention. Marissa squeezed her shoulder. Just remember, you survived 3 years of hell. You survived unemployment and reputation destruction and financial collapse. You survived all of it, and you're still here. One gala can't break you. Lena wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that walking into the Ashford estate wouldn't undo every fragile piece of stability she'd rebuilt. She wanted to believe she could face the people who destroyed her career and maintain her composure, her dignity, her sense of self. But belief required certainty, and Lena hadn't felt certain about anything in 3 years. What if I see Jonathan? She asked. Marissa's expression hardened. Then you look through him like he's furniture, like he's nothing, because that's what he is. Jonathan Reeves, her mentor, her champion, the man who'd recruited her straight out of graduate school and promised her a career that would change her life. He'd delivered on that promise, just not in the way either of them had expected. He'd be at the gala. Of course he would. Senior partner at Garrison Financial, pillar of the community, generous donor to carefully selected charities. He'd be there with his wife, Christine, who was on the boards of 3 museums and chaired a foundation that funded arts education. They'd look perfect together. Successful, established, untouchable. And if Lena saw them, she'd have to smile and nod and pretend that Jonathan hadn't looked her in the eye 3 years ago and called her a liar while he absolutely knew, that everything she'd discovered was true. I can do this, Lena said, trying to convince herself. You can do this, Marissa agreed, but neither of them sounded entirely certain. The night of the gala arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies, as if even the weather had been orchestrated for maximum effect. Lena spent the day in a state of controlled panic, alternating between productive distraction and paralytic anxiety. She cleaned her apartment. She went for a run. She rehearsed conversations in her head, imagining scenarios ranging from polite small talk to public confrontation. None of the rehearsals felt adequate. By 6 o'clock, she'd showered and dried her hair and applied makeup with a precision that bordered on meditation. Each step was deliberate, careful, a way of imposing order on the chaos of her thoughts. The dress hung on her closet door, emerald green and impossible. She put it on at 6:30, taking her time with the zipper, adjusting the fabric, checking her reflection from multiple angles. The woman in the mirror looked composed, elegant, like someone who attended galas regularly and thought nothing of it. The woman in the mirror was a performance. Lena hoped it was convincing. The car service arrived at 7, another expense she couldn't afford but couldn't avoid. You didn't take the subway to the Ashford estate in a designer gown. You arrived in a black car with tinted windows. You stepped out onto a red carpet. You handed your invitation to attendants who smiled like they were genuinely pleased you'd come. The drive took 40 minutes, carrying her from her neighborhood of bodegas and laundromats into progressively wealthier areas where buildings had doormen and trees had small iron fences, and the streets looked like they'd been pressure washed daily. Lena watched the city transform through the window, feeling like she was traveling not just across town but across dimensions, from the world where she lived to the world she'd once inhabited. The Ashford estate sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds at the edge of the city, a mansion that had belonged to an industrial family in the 1920s and now served as a venue for events that required both space and grandeur. Lena had been here once before, years ago, when she'd still believed that hard work and integrity would be enough. She knew better now. The car joined a line of identical black vehicles, all disgorging passengers who looked like they'd stepped from magazine spreads. Women in gowns that probably had names, men in tuxedos that had definitely been tailored. Everyone moving with the casual confidence that came from belonging, from never having to question whether they deserved to be here. Lena's turn came. The door opened. She stepped out into warm evening air and camera flashes and the low murmur of people who had nothing to prove because their position was assured. She handed her invitation to an attendant who barely glanced at it before nodding her through. And just like that, she was inside. The entrance hall was exactly as she remembered. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a staircase that curved upward like something from a movie about people who married into royalty. Staff circulated with champagne on silver trays. Guests clustered in groups, their laughter carefully modulated to project enjoyment without suggesting they were having too much fun. Lena accepted a champagne glass because it gave her something to do with her hands. She recognized faces, some from her previous life, colleagues, clients, people who'd smiled at her in meetings and pretended not to know her when the scandal broke. Others from newspapers and magazines, the kind of people whose names appeared in business sections and society pages. No one approached her. She stood near a column, sipping champagne she didn't taste, wondering what exactly she'd expected to happen. A confrontation? A welcome? Some kind of acknowledgement that she existed? Instead, she got what she'd gotten for 3 years: invisibility. People looked past her, through her. Their eyes slid away as if she were a blank space, unremarkable and unworthy of attention. Lena felt something sharp and familiar twist in her chest. This had been a mistake. Coming here, wearing this dress, thinking that an invitation meant anything other than another opportunity to be reminded of how thoroughly she'd been erased. She should leave. She should set down the champagne glass and walk back through those doors and get in a car and go home and forget she'd ever thought she could reclaim any part of the life that had been taken from her. Lena Carter. The voice came from behind her, low and precise, with the kind of British accent that suggested expensive boarding schools and generational wealth. Lena turned and found herself face to face with Adrian Vale. He was taller than she'd expected. Photographs never quite captured physical presence. 41 but looking younger, or perhaps just better preserved through whatever combination of genetics and resources kept wealthy people from aging like normal humans. Dark hair, gray eyes, a tuxedo that fit like it had been constructed around his specific measurements. He looked at her the way someone might look at an equation they were solving: analytical, focused, devoid of obvious emotion. "Mr. Vale," Lena said, managing to keep her voice steady, "you came." He sounded neither surprised nor pleased, just stating a fact. "I was invited." "You were." He studied her with that same analytical gaze, and Lena had the uncomfortable sensation of being assessed, her value calculated according to metrics she couldn't identify. "I wasn't certain you would accept." "I wasn't certain I would either." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his expression, there and gone too quickly to identify. "Would you walk with me? There's something I'd like to discuss." It wasn't really a question. Lena glanced around the entrance hall, at all the people who weren't looking at her, at the exit that suddenly seemed very far away. "All right," she said. Adrian nodded once, then turned and began walking deeper into the estate. Lena followed, acutely aware of eyes tracking their movement now, because Adrian Vale didn't walk anywhere without people noticing, didn't speak to anyone without it meaning something. He led her through the main ballroom where tables were set for dinner, through a corridor lined with artwork that probably belonged in museums, out onto a terrace that overlooked gardens lit with carefully placed lights that made the whole scene look like someone's fantasy of wealth. They were alone out here, the party noise muted behind closed doors. Adrian stood at the terrace railing looking out at the gardens. Lena stood beside him, waiting, her heart beating faster than it should. 3 years ago, Adrian said finally, you discovered something you weren't supposed to discover. Lena's hands tightened on her champagne glass. I discovered that you were laundering money through shell companies. You discovered that I was managing legitimate business interests for clients who valued privacy. Your clients were criminals. My clients were people with complicated financial situations who required specialized services. He turned to look at her. But you're not wrong. Some of them had acquired their wealth through means that wouldn't survive regulatory scrutiny. And you knew that. I knew that. The admission hung between them, stark and undeniable. So you destroyed my career to protect them, Lena said. No. Adrian's voice was quiet but firm. I destroyed your career to protect my business. The clients were secondary. What mattered was maintaining the infrastructure that allows my operations to function. That's not better. I didn't say it was better, I said it was accurate. He turned back to the gardens. You went to Jonathan Reeves with your evidence. You trusted him to do the right thing. Yes. Jonathan came to me. He showed me everything you'd compiled. He suggested we could make this problem disappear if we acted quickly and decisively. Lena had suspected this. Had known it, really, in the way you know things you can't prove. But hearing Adrian confirm it felt like being gutted all over again. So you framed me, she said. I allowed Jonathan to handle it as he saw fit. He chose to redirect blame in your direction, to suggest you were fabricating evidence to cover your own involvement in irregular activities. I provided resources to support that narrative. Resources: legal representation, media management, strategic communications. Jonathan was thorough, I'll give him that. By the time he was finished, your credibility was demolished and the investigation into my operations had been quietly closed due to lack of reliable evidence. Lena's vision blurred at the edges. She set down her champagne glass on the terrace railing, afraid she might shatter it otherwise. Why are you telling me this? Her voice came out rough. Because you deserve to know the truth. I knew the truth. I lived the truth. I spent 3 years being destroyed by the truth. You knew what happened. You didn't know why. Adrian finally turned to face her fully. Jonathan Reeves wasn't protecting me, Lena. He was protecting himself. The irregularities you discovered at Garrison Financial, the money laundering, the offshore accounts, the falsified records, those weren't just client activities. Jonathan had been skimming from those accounts for years. Millions of dollars, carefully extracted and hidden in ways that made it look like normal operational expenses. Lena stared at him. What? When you started investigating, you weren't just threatening my clients. You were threatening to expose Jonathan's theft. He couldn't allow that, so he came to me with a deal. He'd eliminate you as a threat if I'd help him cover his tracks. You're lying. I'm not. Adrian pulled a phone from his pocket, tapped it a few times, then handed it to her. I've had these for 3 years. I kept them as insurance, in case Jonathan ever decided our arrangement was inconvenient. Lena looked at the screen. Bank records. Transaction histories. Account statements showing systematic theft spanning nearly a decade. Money moved through elaborate networks designed to obscure its destination. All of it traceable back to Jonathan Reeves. I don't understand, Lena said slowly. If you've had this information for 3 years, why didn't you use it? Because Jonathan was useful. He managed Garrison Financial competently. He facilitated client relationships I valued, and he understood the importance of discretion. Destroying him would have created complications I didn't need. So you just let him destroy me instead? Yes. The answer was so blunt, so devoid of guilt, that Lena almost laughed. And now? She asked. Why tell me now? Why invite me here, show me this, confirm everything I suspected but couldn't prove? Adrian took back his phone, returned it to his pocket. Because Jonathan Reeves is no longer useful. He's become careless, greedy, increasingly convinced that he's untouchable. Last month, he attempted to leverage his knowledge of my operations to demand a larger share of certain transactions. It was poorly conceived and poorly executed. So this is revenge. You're going to use me to destroy him the way he destroyed me. No. Adrian's gray eyes were steady on hers. I'm going to destroy him because he's become a liability. You can choose whether to be part of that process or not. But either way, I wanted you to know the truth. You were collateral damage in a conflict that had nothing to do with you. You deserved better than what you received. Lena's laugh came out harsh. That's not an apology. I don't apologize. Apologies imply regret, and I don't regret business decisions. But I can acknowledge when someone has been treated unjustly, and I can take steps to correct that injustice if it serves my interest to do so. How generous of you. It's not generosity, it's pragmatism. He turned back to the gardens. Tomorrow, the Financial Crimes Division will receive an anonymous tip about irregularities at Garrison Financial. They'll investigate. They'll find evidence of Jonathan's theft. His career will be over, his reputation destroyed, his freedom likely forfeited. And you'll be untouchable, as always. My operations are structured to withstand scrutiny. Jonathan's are not. That's the difference between building an empire and building a house of cards. Lena's mind was racing, trying to process everything he'd told her, trying to separate truth from manipulation, from calculated revelation. "Why invite me here?" she asked again. "Why not just send me the information anonymously?" For the first time, Adrian's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. "Because you spent 3 years being invisible," he said. "Because you lost your career and your reputation and your life, and you survived it without breaking. Because when I invited you here tonight, every person who destroyed you expected you to either refuse or show up broken and humiliated. I thought you deserved the chance to prove them wrong." Lena looked past him, through the glass doors into the ballroom where dinner would be served soon, where hundreds of people who'd written her off would see her standing beside Adrian Vale. "This is a performance," she said slowly. "You're using me to send a message. I'm providing you an opportunity. What you do with it is your choice. And if I walk away right now, if I leave and never speak to you again, then you leave. No consequences, no retaliation. You keep the information I've given you, do with it what you will. But you'll have walked away from the first opportunity in 3 years to be seen again by the people who made you invisible." He was right, and Lena hated that he was right. She hated that he'd orchestrated this entire evening, hated that he'd calculated her response, hated that he'd destroyed her career and was now offering her scraps of vindication like they were supposed to make everything balanced. But she hated being invisible more. "What happens now?" she asked. Adrian checked his watch. Expensive, understated, probably worth more than everything Lena owned. "Now we go to dinner. We sit at the head table. We have conversations with influential people who will be very curious about who you are and why you're here. You demonstrate that you're intelligent, capable, and completely unbothered by 3 years of attempted erasure. Just like that. Just like that." He offered his arm, formal and old-fashioned. "Unless you'd prefer to leave." Lena looked at his offered arm, looked at the ballroom beyond the glass doors, looked at the future that branched before her, one path leading back to invisibility, safety, the small life she'd built from ruins, the other leading into uncertainty, risk, the possibility of being seen again. She'd spent 3 years being careful, 3 years being small, 3 years surviving. Maybe it was time to do more than survive. Lena placed her hand on Adrian's arm. "Let's go to dinner," she said, and together they walked back into a room full of people who'd tried to bury her. Time to show them what growing from graves looked like. The ballroom had filled during their absence, transformed from an elegant space into a living exhibit of wealth and influence. Every table held 8 people who mattered, or who wanted people to think they mattered, or who'd paid enough to charity to earn a seat among those who did. Lena felt the shift the moment they entered. Conversations didn't stop exactly. That would have been too obvious, too vulgar. But they stuttered. Voices dropped. Eyes tracked their movement across the room with the predatory attention of people who understood that information was currency, and something interesting was happening. Adrian Vale had arrived with a woman no one recognized. More accurately, Adrian Vale had arrived with a woman everyone had forgotten existed. "Breathe," Adrian said quietly, his voice pitched for her alone. "I am breathing. You're holding your breath. It makes you look nervous." "I am nervous." "Then fake it better." His bluntness was almost funny. Almost. Lena forced herself to inhale properly, to straighten her shoulders, to move through the room like she belonged here instead of like she was waiting for someone to call security. The head table sat on a raised platform, a positioning that was supposedly about acoustics and sightlines, but was really about hierarchy. Adrian guided her toward it with the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to occupy premium space. They were the last to arrive. 7 people were already seated, drinks in hand, mid-conversation. They looked up as Adrian and Lena approached. Lena recognized most of them. Victoria Chen, CEO of a tech conglomerate that had absorbed half its competitors in the last decade. Marcus Ashford, whose family owned the estate and whose foundation funded everything from children's hospitals to political campaigns. Senator Patricia Gorman, who sat on 3 committees that regulated the financial industry. Others whose names Lena couldn't immediately recall, but whose faces appeared regularly in publications that tracked power. And Jonathan Reeves. He sat 2 seats from the head of the table, champagne glass halfway to his lips, his expression frozen in something that might have been shock or might have been horror. His wife Christine sat beside him, looking exactly as Lena remembered, perfectly styled, perfectly composed, perfectly calibrated to be the ideal partner for a man who needed perfection as proof of his success. "Adrian," Victoria Chen said, rising smoothly, "we were beginning to think you'd abandoned us for more interesting company." "I had something to attend to." Adrian pulled out a chair for Lena, the one directly beside his at the head of the table, then took his own seat. "Everyone, this is Lena Carter. Lena, this is everyone." It wasn't an introduction so much as a statement, delivered with the expectation that no further explanation was required. Lena sat, acutely aware of Jonathan's eyes on her, of Christine's neutral smile, of the calculating gazes trying to place her in whatever mental database they maintained of people worth knowing. "Carter?" Marcus Ashford said slowly, like he was testing the name. "That's familiar." "Lena used to work in finance," Adrian said before she could respond. "We've known each other for several years." It was technically true and completely misleading, which Lena supposed was the point. "Finance." Victoria Chen's eyes sharpened. "Which firm?" "Garrison Financial," Lena said, because there was no point pretending otherwise. "I left a few years ago." "Left." Jonathan's voice was tight. That's one way to describe it. The table went very quiet. Adrian picked up his wine glass, examining the contents with apparent fascination. "Jonathan, I don't believe we've discussed your recent activities. How is business at Garrison?" It was a deflection, smooth and deliberate, but Jonathan didn't take the escape route. "Business is excellent," he said, his eyes still on Lena. "Though I'm surprised to see you here. I'd heard you were working in the nonprofit sector now." The implication was clear. Working in nonprofits was what happened to people who couldn't hack real careers. "I am," Lena said evenly. "We provide legal services to people who can't afford representation." How noble. Christine's smile hadn't wavered. "Though it must be quite a change from your previous work." "It is, but I find it more fulfilling than enabling money laundering." She said it pleasantly, conversationally, like she was discussing the weather. Christine's smile finally cracked. Jonathan's face went red. The rest of the table suddenly found their wine glasses fascinating. "Lena," Adrian said, his tone carrying a hint of warning that might have been real or might have been performance. "Perhaps we should keep dinner conversation light." "Of course." Lena picked up her own wine glass. "Apologies. I sometimes forget that polite society prefers not to acknowledge uncomfortable truths." Victoria Chen laughed, a sharp, genuine sound that broke the tension. "I like her." "Adrian, where have you been hiding her?" "I haven't been hiding her. She's been rebuilding after being treated abominably by people who should have known better." And there it was. The statement that made everything clear to everyone at the table. Adrian Vale had chosen a side, and it wasn't Jonathan Reeves's side. Senator Gorman leaned forward, interested now. "What happened?" "Nothing worth discussing," Jonathan said quickly. "I disagree." Adrian set down his wine glass. 3 years ago, Lena discovered evidence of systematic fraud at Garrison Financial. Instead of being commended for her integrity, she was blamed for the fraud, fired, and essentially blacklisted from the industry. Her evidence was buried, her reputation destroyed, and the actual criminals faced no consequences. "That's not," Jonathan started. "It's precisely what happened." Adrian's voice was quiet, but absolute. "And I know because I was peripherally involved. Not directly, but involved enough to understand what was done to her and why." Lena stared at him. This wasn't what they had discussed on the terrace. This was something else entirely. A public declaration that turned her from invisible to vindicated in 30 seconds. Marcus Ashford was frowning. If there was evidence of fraud, why wasn't it prosecuted? Because the people responsible had resources and connections sufficient to make inconvenient evidence disappear. Adrian's gaze moved to Jonathan. "Isn't that right?" Jonathan looked like he was trying to swallow glass. "I think you're misremembering events." "I have an exceptional memory. I also have documentation, if anyone's interested. The threat hung there, polite and devastating. Christine touched Jonathan's arm, a gesture that looked supportive but might have been restraining. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Jonathan has always been scrupulous about ethical standards. Of course he has, Victoria Chen said, but her tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. She turned to Lena. What are you doing now, besides the nonprofit work? It was a redirect, possibly kind or possibly just pragmatic. Powerful people didn't enjoy watching other powerful people get gutted in public unless there was strategic value. Just the nonprofit work, Lena said, and trying to remember what it feels like to be visible. You're quite visible now. Victoria's smile was knowing. Adrian doesn't bring guests to these events. Ever. So your presence here is already making a statement. What statement would that be? That you matter. That someone with influence thinks you matter. In this room, that's everything. Lena wanted to argue, to insist that mattering shouldn't depend on proximity to influential people, that her value existed independent of Adrian Vale's endorsement. But Victoria wasn't wrong. This was how power worked, not through merit or justice or fairness, but through association and perception and carefully orchestrated moments that shifted how people were seen. Dinner was served, courses that were art projects disguised as food, each plate arranged with the kind of precision that made eating feel destructive. Conversation flowed around Lena, through her, occasionally to her as people asked careful questions designed to assess her value. She answered honestly when honesty seemed strategic, vaguely when vagueness served better, and watched Jonathan deteriorate across the table. He was sweating despite the air conditioning, drinking too much wine, responding to questions with increasing irritation. Christine maintained her composure, but Lena noticed her grip tightening on her fork, the small muscle twitching in her jaw. They knew. Somehow they knew that something had shifted, that the evening wasn't going according to whatever plan they'd had, that Adrian's attention to Lena meant something dangerous for them. Between the main course and dessert, Adrian leaned close to Lena. You're doing well. I haven't done anything. You've been yourself, that's enough. Is it? Or is this all just theater designed to make Jonathan nervous before you destroy him? Can it be both? Lena turned to look at him directly. His expression was neutral, unreadable, the face of someone who'd learned early that showing emotion was showing weakness. I don't know what you want from me, she said quietly. Nothing. People like you don't do things for nothing. People like me do things for strategic advantage. Having you here provides strategic advantage, but that doesn't mean I want something from you specifically. He paused. Though if I did, I'd be direct about it. How reassuring. It should be. Dishonesty is inefficient. Before Lena could respond, Victoria Chen stood and tapped her wine glass for attention. The room quieted. Thank you all for being here tonight, Victoria said, her voice carrying easily across the ballroom. As most of you know, we're gathered to support the Meridian Foundation's work in financial literacy and economic opportunity. But before we get to the formal program, I thought we might hear from someone whose story embodies exactly why this work matters. She looked directly at Lena. Lena Carter used to work in finance. She discovered fraud, reported it, and was destroyed for doing the right thing. She lost her career, her reputation, her livelihood, not because she was wrong, but because she threatened people who had the power to protect themselves at her expense. And yet she survived. She rebuilt. She found work that matters and created a life that doesn't depend on the approval of people who failed her. Victoria's smile was sharp. I think we could all learn something from that kind of resilience. Applause rippled through the room, uncertain at first, then building. Lena sat frozen, her heart hammering. This wasn't what she'd expected. This wasn't... Stand up, Adrian murmured. Accept it. She stood on legs that felt unsteady, smiled at a room full of strangers and enemies, and people who suddenly looked at her like she was worth seeing. The applause continued for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 seconds. When Lena sat back down, her hands were shaking. That was a setup, she said to Adrian. Victoria and I discussed it earlier. I thought you deserved recognition. You thought you could use me to embarrass Jonathan. Also true. He sipped his wine. Do you object? Lena didn't know. She should object. She should be furious at being manipulated, at being turned into a prop in whatever game Adrian was playing. But she'd been invisible for 3 years, and for 30 seconds she'd been seen. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Speeches happened, important people saying important things about financial literacy and opportunity and giving back. Donations were pledged, totals announced, applause distributed appropriately. Through it all, Jonathan sat rigid and silent, while Christine maintained her smile and Lena tried to process what had happened. When dinner finally ended, people began moving toward the ballroom's adjoining rooms where drinks and networking awaited. Lena stood, uncertain whether she was expected to stay or if her role in the evening's performance was complete. "Walk with me," Adrian said. It still wasn't a question. They moved through the crowd, which parted for Adrian the way water parts for ships. People nodded, smiled, attempted to catch his attention. He acknowledged them minimally, his focus on navigation. He led her to a smaller room off the main ballroom, a library with floor-to-ceiling books and leather furniture, and the kind of quiet that money bought. They were alone. "You're angry," Adrian observed. "I'm a lot of things, but primarily angry." Lena turned to face him. "You used me. You orchestrated this entire evening to destroy Jonathan, and you used me as your weapon. I orchestrated this evening to restore your reputation and eliminate a business liability. That I accomplished both simultaneously is efficiency, not manipulation." "You didn't restore my reputation." Victoria Chen made a speech. "That's not the same thing." "No." Adrian moved to the window, looking out at gardens lit like a fairy tale. "But it's the beginning. By tomorrow morning, everyone who matters will know that Adrian Vale brought Lena Carter to the Meridian Gala. They'll know Victoria Chen praised her publicly. They'll know I seated her at the head table and treated her as an equal. So perception creates reality in our world. If I treat you as someone important, others will follow. Opportunities will appear. Doors will open. Your phone will start ringing again. Because you decided it should. Yes." His honesty was infuriating. "I don't want opportunities that come because you decided I should have them," Lena said. "I want opportunities I earn. Then earn them. Use what tonight gave you as a foundation and build something real. Or don't. Disappear back into nonprofit work and safety and the knowledge that you were right, but it didn't matter." He turned from the window. "I don't care which you choose, but at least now you have a choice." "Why do you care at all? You destroyed my career, you admitted it on the terrace. I allowed your career to be destroyed as collateral damage in a business decision. That was pragmatic but regrettable. Now circumstances have changed, and restoring you serves my interests while also addressing that regret. Everyone benefits. Except Jonathan. Jonathan is a thief and a liar who's been stealing from his own firm for a decade. He deserves what's coming." Lena couldn't argue with that. She wanted to maintain moral high ground, wanted to insist that revenge was beneath her. But Jonathan had looked her in the eye 3 years ago and called her a fabricator while destroying her life to cover his own crimes. He deserved what was coming. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you decide who you want to be. The woman who survived or the woman who thrives." That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Adrian checked his watch again. "I need to make appearances. You're welcome to stay, network. Remind people you exist. Or you can leave. The car that brought you will take you home whenever you're ready." Boom. He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, you were impressive tonight. Not everyone could walk into a room full of people who destroyed them and maintain composure. I almost threw up twice. But you didn't. That's what counts." Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone in the library with leather-bound books and too many thoughts. She could leave. Should leave. Go home, process everything that had happened, try to separate truth from manipulation from opportunity. But the ballroom was still full of people. Important people. People who might remember her now, who might see her as something other than a cautionary tale. Lena looked down at her emerald dress, at the armor she'd rented for one night. She'd come here to prove she wasn't afraid. Time to finish what she started. The ballroom had transformed again during dinner, furniture rearranged to create spaces for conversation instead of eating. Clusters of people stood with drinks, their body language telegraphing hierarchy and alliance, and who was courting whose favor. Lena grabbed a fresh champagne glass from a passing server and moved into the crowd. The first person to approach her was Marcus Ashford. "That was quite an entrance earlier," he said, his smile genuine. "Victoria doesn't hand out praise lightly. I'm still not sure I deserved it." She wouldn't have said it if you didn't." He studied her with open curiosity. "What are you planning to do next?" "I'm sorry?" "With your career, you clearly don't belong in nonprofits. No offense to nonprofit work, but you've got sharp edges that need harder problems." Lena hadn't expected directness. "I don't know yet." "Fair enough, but when you figure it out, call my office. I'm always looking for people who understand that doing the right thing sometimes costs everything." He handed her a card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. "Especially people who do it anyway." He drifted away before Lena could respond, leaving her holding his card and wondering if the evening was real or if she'd wake up tomorrow and discover it had all been an elaborate hallucination. More people approached. Some she recognized, some she didn't. They asked careful questions, offered careful compliments, sized her up with the practiced efficiency of people who made snap judgments for a living. A few were clearly just curious. Who was this woman Adrian Vale had elevated? Others seemed genuinely interested in her perspective, her experience, her analysis of whatever financial topic they wanted to discuss. Lena found herself falling into old patterns, answering questions with precision, offering insights drawn from years of analyzing markets and institutions, demonstrating that 3 years away hadn't dulled her understanding. It felt good. Dangerous, intoxicating, like remembering you could run after years of walking. "Lena." She turned to find Christine Reeves standing behind her, alone for once, her perfect composure showing hairline cracks. "Christine." "I wanted to apologize." Lena blinked. "For what?" "For not speaking up 3 years ago. I knew Jonathan was lying. I knew you were telling the truth. But I stayed silent because—" Christine's voice wavered slightly. "Because I chose my marriage over my integrity, and I've regretted it every day since." "Then why stay silent now?" "Because I'm a coward." She said it flatly, without self-pity. "Because Jonathan controls our finances, our social standing, everything I've built my identity around. Because leaving him would mean losing the life I've spent 20 years creating." Lena wanted to feel satisfaction, Christine Reeves admitting weakness, admitting complicity, but she just felt tired. "What do you want from me?" Lena asked. "Nothing, just when everything comes out, and it will come out, I want you to know that I knew you were telling the truth. That matters, even if I'm not brave enough to say it publicly." Christine walked away before Lena could respond, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost. The evening continued. More conversations, more networking, more careful dance of people assessing each other's value. Lena's feet hurt, and her face ached from smiling, but she stayed. Around 11, she found herself on the terrace again, needing air and space in a moment without performing. The gardens were still lit, still beautiful, still fake in that way expensive things often were. "You're still here." Adrian had materialized beside her, somehow moving silently despite marble floors. "I'm still here," Lena agreed. "Did you network?" "I talk to people. I don't know if that counts as networking. If they remember you tomorrow, it counts." He joined her at the railing. Jonathan left an hour ago. He looked ill. "Good." Christine stayed. She's been making apologies to various people, very carefully, not explaining what she's apologizing for. She apologized to me. Did she? It wasn't a question. "What did you say?" "Nothing. She didn't want absolution. She wanted to confess." They stood in silence for a moment, the party noise muted behind them. "Thank you," Lena said finally. "For what?" "For tonight, for the invitation, for—" She gestured vaguely. "Whatever this was." "It was strategy. It was also kindness, even if you won't call it that." Adrian's expression didn't change. "Kindness implies altruism. This served my purposes." "Can it be both?" Lena echoed his earlier words back at him. Something that might have been a smile touched his mouth, there and gone. "Perhaps." "What happens tomorrow?" Tomorrow, the Financial Crimes Division receives their anonymous tip. Jonathan's life begins unraveling. Your phone starts ringing with opportunities from people who suddenly remember you exist. And you? I continue running my empire, secure in the knowledge that one liability has been eliminated and one asset has been restored. I'm an asset now? You've always been an asset. You just weren't being utilized properly. Lena should have been offended. Instead, she found herself almost laughing. You're terrible at compliments. I don't give compliments. I make accurate assessments. That's the same thing. It's not remotely the same thing. They fell quiet again, and Lena realized with surprise that the silence was comfortable. Not easy exactly, but not hostile. Just two people standing in expensive darkness, watching lights reflect off gardens. I should go, Lena said eventually. You should, but neither of them moved. Will I see you again? The question was out before Lena could stop it. Adrian turned to look at her, his gray eyes unreadable in the low light. Do you want to? I don't know. You're manipulative and cold and you ruined my life. Accurate. But you also gave me tonight. You gave me visibility and vindication and the chance to remember who I used to be. Also accurate. So I don't know if I want to see you again, but I think I might. Then you will. He pulled another card from his pocket. Apparently he carried an endless supply. My direct number. Call if you want to discuss opportunities. Or don't. The choice is yours. Lena took the card. Heavy stock, minimalist design, just his name and a phone number. What kind of opportunities? The kind that utilize your skills properly. The kind that pay what you're worth. The kind that require intelligence and integrity and the ability to see patterns other people miss. Working for you. Working with me. There's a difference. Is there? You'll find out if you call. Adrian nodded once, formal and final, then walked back into the ballroom. Lena stayed on the terrace for another 10 minutes, holding his card and trying to organize her thoughts into something coherent. She'd come here expecting humiliation, expecting to be reminded of her place, her failure, her irrelevance. Instead, she'd been seen, praised, offered opportunities she hadn't dared imagine, all orchestrated by a man who'd admitted to destroying her career and felt no guilt about it. She should throw away his card, should go home, go back to work on Monday, forget this night had ever happened. But the card was heavy in her hand, and the ballroom was full of people who now remembered she existed, and her reflection in the terrace glass showed a woman who looked like she belonged in emerald silk and expensive spaces. Lena slipped Adrian's card into her purse. Then she went to find the car that would take her home. The drive back across the city felt different than the drive there. Same route, same neighborhoods transitioning from wealthy to working class, same street she'd traveled hours earlier. But she was different, or maybe just remembered. Her phone buzzed as the car merged onto the parkway. A text from Marissa. You're trending on social media. What the hell happened? Lena opened Twitter. Her name was there, attached to photos from the gala, attached to Victoria Chen's speech, attached to speculation about her relationship with Adrian Vale. The comments were vicious and supportive in equal measure, people defending her, attacking her, theorizing about her, reducing her to hashtags and hot takes. She was visible again. Whether that was victory or disaster remained to be seen. The car dropped her at her building just after midnight. Lena took the stairs to her fourth-floor walk-up, her feet screaming in shoes that had never been designed for comfort. Her apartment looked exactly as she'd left it. Small, shabby, comfortable in its shabbiness. The invitation was still on her kitchen counter where she'd left it days ago. Lena picked it up, looked at the gold embossing one last time, then dropped it in the recycling bin. She didn't need the invitation anymore. She had Adrian's card, Marcus Ashford's card, address she needed to return tomorrow, a phone that would probably start ringing soon with opportunities or threats or both. She had visibility. Now she just had to figure out what to do with it. Lena woke Monday morning to 47 missed calls. She lay in bed staring at her phone screen, watching notifications multiply like rabbits. Voicemails, texts, emails from addresses she didn't recognize. LinkedIn requests from people whose profiles showed titles like Senior Vice President and Managing Director, and words that meant power. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them. Some were congratulatory, others curious, a few openly hostile. One email had the subject line, "You don't belong," and Lena deleted it without reading further. Another offered her a consulting position with a salary that made her monthly nonprofit paycheck look like lunch money. She got out of bed, made coffee with hands that wouldn't steady, and tried to remember how to breathe properly. The apartment felt smaller than it had on Friday. Or maybe she felt bigger. Or maybe nothing had changed except her awareness of how much space she wasn't taking up. Her phone rang. Marcus Ashford's name appeared on the screen. Lena stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello? I hope I'm not calling too early." His voice was cheerful, energetic, completely unbothered by the fact that it was 7:30 in the morning. "I wanted to catch you before your day got away from you." "My day hasn't started yet." "Perfect. Then you have time for breakfast. There's a place in Midtown, quiet, good coffee. Can you meet me at 9? Lena looked around her apartment, looked at her coffee mug with the chipped handle, looked at the stack of intake forms she'd brought home from work on Friday that needed processing. "I have work," she said. "Call in sick. I can't just—" "Lena, I'm offering you an opportunity to discuss your future with someone who can actually affect it. Your nonprofit will survive without you for 1 day." He wasn't wrong, but the presumption irritated her. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked. "The kind we should discuss in person. 9 o'clock. I'll text you the address." He hung up before she could argue. Lena called her boss at 8, feeling guilty and exhilarated in equal measure. Sandra answered on the second ring, sounding harried and tired because she always sounded harried and tired. "I can't come in today, Lena said. "I'm sorry. Something came up." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I just need to handle some personal things." There was a pause. Then Sandra said, "I saw the pictures from that gala. You looked beautiful." "You saw those?" "Everyone saw those. You're all over social media." Another pause. "Lena, if you need time to sort things out, take it. But be careful, okay? People like that. They don't help people like us unless there's something in it for them." "I know. I hope you do." Lena spent the next hour getting ready with a care that bordered on obsessive. Shower, hair, makeup applied with precision learned from years of client meetings. She chose a dress she'd kept from her previous life. Simple, navy blue, expensive enough to signal she understood professional standards without looking like she was trying too hard. The woman in the mirror looked competent, polished, like someone who belonged in rooms where decisions got made. Lena hoped it wasn't just costume. The restaurant Marcus had chosen occupied the ground floor of a building that probably cost more per square foot than most people earned in a year. Inside, it was all exposed brick and Edison bulbs and the kind of studied casualness that required significant wealth to pull off. Marcus was already there, sitting at a corner table with a newspaper and coffee. He stood when he saw her, smiled like they were old friends instead of near strangers. "You came." "You didn't give me much choice." "I gave you several choices. You chose the interesting one." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Coffee?" "Please." A server appeared immediately, poured coffee from a French press into a cup that was warm to the touch. Real cream in a small pitcher, sugar cubes with tiny silver tongs. Lena added cream and tried not to calculate what this breakfast would cost. "So," Marcus said, setting aside his newspaper, "let's talk about what you want." "I don't know what I want." "Sure you do. You just haven't admitted it yet." He leaned back, studying her. 3 years ago, you were on track to become one of the youngest managing directors in Garrison's history. You were smart, driven, talented at seeing patterns other people missed. Then you discovered something you weren't supposed to discover and got destroyed for it. I'm aware of my own history. But are you aware of what it cost you? Not just the job and the reputation, but the trajectory. You were building towards something significant, and it got cut off. So now you're working at a nonprofit making poverty wages and telling yourself it's fine because the work matters. The work does matter. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying you matter too, and you're wasting yourself on work that any competent administrator could do. He sipped his coffee. You could be shaping policy, exposing corruption, building systems that actually function. Instead, you're filing paperwork and answering phones. It stung because it was true. What are you offering? Lena asked. I run a foundation that investigates financial crimes and supports regulatory reform. We fund journalism, legal advocacy, research. We go after the people who think wealth makes them untouchable. His smile was sharp. I could use someone who understands how those people operate, someone who's been inside their world and isn't afraid of them anymore. I'm still afraid of them. But you showed up to the gala anyway. That's what matters. Lena turned her coffee cup in slow circles. What would the job be? Director of Investigations. You'd lead a team analyzing financial institutions, tracking patterns of fraud and abuse, building cases for regulatory action or criminal prosecution. You'd work with journalists, lawyers, former regulators. You'd have resources and authority and the backing to actually make a difference. And the salary? He named a number that made Lena's coffee cup freeze halfway to her mouth. That's not real. It's market rate for someone with your skills and experience. I haven't worked in finance for 3 years. You've been surviving on nothing while people who destroyed you got rich. That's harder than working in finance. Marcus leaned forward. Look, I'm not offering this because I'm nice. I'm offering it because you're qualified, and I need someone who can't be bought or intimidated. Someone who's already lost everything and rebuilt anyway. That's a hell of a job requirement. It's an honest one. A server appeared to take their order. Lena asked for eggs she wouldn't taste and toast she wouldn't eat. Marcus ordered the same, then waited until they were alone again. Think about it, he said. You don't have to decide today. But don't wait too long. People's attention spans are short, and right now you're interesting. In a month you might not be. Is that a threat? It's reality. Adrian Vale gave you visibility, but visibility fades unless you do something with it. The mention of Adrian's name brought everything back. The terrace conversation, the public vindication, the business card currently sitting in her purse. Have you talked to Adrian about this? Lena asked. No, why? He offered me something too, sort of. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Adrian Vale doesn't make offers. He makes calculations and then presents conclusions. He gave me his card, said to call if I wanted to discuss opportunities. Did he specify what kind of opportunities? Working with him, using my skills properly, he said. Marcus laughed, sharp and surprised. That's either the best thing that could happen to you or the worst. Possibly both. That's helpful. It's accurate. Adrian is brilliant and ruthless and completely amoral when it comes to business. Working with him would give you access to information and influence most people spend their whole careers chasing. It would also compromise every principle you have. You don't know what my principles are. Sure I do. You reported fraud when reporting it cost you everything. That tells me everything I need to know about your principles. Breakfast arrived. Lena pushed eggs around her plate while Marcus ate with the unselfconscious efficiency of someone who didn't overthink food. Can I ask you something? Lena said. You just did, but go ahead. Why does everyone suddenly care? For 3 years, I was invisible, irrelevant. Now Adrian acknowledges I exist, and suddenly people are offering me jobs and wanting meetings. Nothing about me changed, just other people's perception. Marcus set down his fork. Welcome to how the world actually works. Value is perception. Always has been. You were always talented, always capable, but perception said you were damaged goods. Now perception says you're someone Adrian Vale vouches for, and that changes everything. That's disgusting. It's efficient, unfair, arbitrary, and frequently unjust, but efficient. He smiled without humor. The question is whether you're going to be disgusted from a position of poverty and irrelevance, or whether you're going to use the system while working to change it. Those aren't the only options. Name another. Lena couldn't. They finished breakfast discussing logistics, how long she'd need to give notice at the nonprofit, when she could start, what the onboarding process looked like. Marcus made it sound inevitable, like her acceptance was a foregone conclusion. Maybe it was. When they stood to leave, Marcus handed her a folder. Background on the foundation, our current projects, organizational structure, budget information. Read it, think about it, call me by Friday. And if I say no, then I find someone else and you go back to filing intake forms. But I don't think you will. He was right. He was probably right. Lena hated that he was probably right. She took the subway home, clutching the folder against her chest, trying to process everything that had happened in 72 hours. Saturday night, she'd been invisible. Monday morning, she had job offers and opportunities and decisions that felt too big for her small apartment. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Adrian. Call me when you have time to talk." Lena stared at the message for 3 stops, then dialed before she could overthink it. He answered immediately. "You had breakfast with Marcus Ashford." "How did you—" She stopped. "Of course you know. You probably know what I ordered. Eggs and toast, barely touched. You were too anxious to eat. Are you having me followed? Don't be dramatic. Marcus texted me. He wanted to make sure offering you a position wouldn't create conflict. Would it? That depends on what you decide." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Have you thought about my offer?" "You didn't make an offer. You gave me a business card." "The card was the offer. I don't give those out casually." "What exactly would working with you involve?" "Come to my office. We'll discuss it properly." "When?" "Now, if you're available. I have a meeting at 2, but the morning is clear." Lena looked around the subway car, looked at the folder from Marcus, looked at her reflection in the window, still wearing the navy dress and competent expression. "Where's your office?" He gave her an address in Lower Manhattan, a building she recognized from financial news coverage. "I'll have security expecting you. Ask for me at the desk." "Adrian." "Yes?" She wanted to ask a dozen questions, wanted to know what he really wanted, why he was doing this, whether she could trust anything he said. Instead, she asked, "Should I be afraid of you?" There was a long silence. Then, "Probably, but I don't think that will stop you." He hung up. Lena got off at the next stop and caught a train heading downtown. Adrian's building was steel and glass, aggressively modern, the kind of architecture that announced wealth through minimalism. The lobby was 3 stories tall with marble floors and abstract art that probably cost more than Lena's entire education. She gave her name to security. They made a call, nodded, directed her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. The elevator opened directly into Adrian's offices on the 49th floor. The space was open, flooded with light from floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of the harbor and the city sprawling endlessly. Minimal furniture, all clean lines and expensive materials. No clutter, no personal items, no indication that humans actually worked here. A woman in her 30s appeared from somewhere, perfectly composed. "Ms. Carter, Mr. Vale is expecting you. Please follow me." They walked through the space to a corner office that was somehow even more austere than the rest. Adrian sat behind a desk that was just a sheet of glass suspended on steel supports, working on a laptop, looking exactly as he had at the gala except wearing a suit instead of a tuxedo. He glanced up when Lena entered, nodded to the assistant who disappeared silently. "Sit." Lena sat in a chair that was more sculpture than furniture. Adrian closed his laptop, gave her his complete attention. "Marcus offered you a job." "He did." "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet. That's why I'm here." "To compare offers?" "To understand what you want from me." Adrian stood, moved to the windows, looked out at the city like he owned it. Maybe he did, in ways that mattered. "I run multiple operations," he said. "Some are public, some aren't. All of them require people who can analyze complex financial systems, identify vulnerabilities, predict behavior. You have those skills. So do lots of people. Lots of people have technical skills. Very few have technical skills combined with integrity that can't be purchased." He turned to look at her. "You exposed fraud knowing it would cost you everything. That makes you either stupid or incorruptible. I'm betting on incorruptible." "Why do you need someone incorruptible?" "Your business model depends on operating in gray areas. My business model depends on trust. Clients trust me to protect their interests without exposing them to unnecessary risk. That requires absolute discretion and absolute accuracy. People who can be bought make mistakes because their loyalties shift. You won't." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. If money could buy you, you would have stayed quiet 3 years ago. Jonathan offered you a settlement, a substantial one. You refused." Lena had forgotten about that. the lawyer who'd appeared in her apartment offering 6 figures if she'd sign an NDA and disappear quietly. She'd thrown him out. That was different. It was exactly the same. You chose principles over pragmatism. Adrian returned to his desk. I need someone who'll do the same for me. Someone who'll tell me the truth even when the truth is inconvenient, who'll identify problems before they become catastrophes, who won't rationalize mistakes because fixing them is uncomfortable. And you think I'll do that for you, even though you destroyed my career? I think you'll do it because you can't help yourself. You see patterns. You identify problems. You need to fix things even when fixing them cost you. He leaned back in his chair. That's not a compliment. It's a liability in most contexts. But in this context, it's exactly what I need. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong about her, that she'd learned to keep her head down, that 3 years of survival had taught her when to stay quiet. But he wasn't wrong. What would the job actually involve, she asked. Analysis of financial institutions and transactions, risk assessment, due diligence on potential clients and partners, identifying regulatory exposure. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, slid it across the glass surface. This is a sample project. Client wants to acquire a company. I need to know if the company's financials are legitimate or if they're hiding problems. Lena opened the folder. Balance sheets, transaction histories, corporate structures, the kind of documents she used to analyze daily. Her fingers itched to start working. How long do I have? She asked. For what? To analyze this. Adrian smiled, small and knowing. Take it with you. Bring me your assessment by Friday. If it's good, we'll discuss terms. You're testing me. I'm providing an opportunity for you to demonstrate value. That's how business works. Lena closed the folder, held it against her chest. What if I take this to Marcus instead? Use it to show him I can handle his investigation work? Then you'd be smarter than I thought, but you won't. Why not? Because Marcus's job is about punishing people who've already committed crimes. My job is about preventing crimes from happening in the first place. You're more interested in prevention than punishment. You don't know what I'm interested in, don't I? Adrian's gray eyes were steady on hers. You reported fraud because you wanted to stop it, not because you wanted to destroy Jonathan. His destruction was incidental. You would have been satisfied if the fraud stopped and everyone involved reformed quietly. He was right again, and Lena hated it. What's the salary? She asked. He named a number that was 50% higher than Marcus's offer. That's obscene. That's market rate for someone with your skills working in my environment. Plus, you'll need to replace 3 years of lost earnings and rebuild savings. This accelerates that process. I need to think about it. Think faster. Marcus gave you until Friday. I'm giving you until Thursday. Adrian returned his attention to his laptop, a clear dismissal. My assistant will show you out. Lena stood, still holding the folder. Why Thursday? Because Friday, you'll accept Marcus's offer, and I'll lose access to someone I want on my team. Thursday gives me time to make a counteroffer if needed. You're very confident I'll choose you. I'm very confident you'll choose what actually utilizes your abilities, and Marcus's foundation is playing defense while I'm playing offense. You're not a defensive player. The assistant appeared in the doorway as if summoned telepathically. Lena followed her back through the pristine office space, into the elevator, down to the lobby. She emerged onto the street clutching 2 folders, one from Marcus offering redemption through justice, one from Adrian offering power through pragmatism. Both men were right about her. Both men wanted something from her. Both offers would change her life in ways she couldn't predict. Lena walked toward the subway, her mind spinning through variables and calculations and probabilities. This was familiar territory, analyzing options, weighing risks, identifying the optimal path forward. Except she'd made optimal decisions before and they'd destroyed her. Maybe optimal wasn't the goal anymore. The week dissolved into a blur of analysis and insomnia. Lena went to work at the nonprofit because she'd only called in sick Monday, and disappearing entirely felt wrong. But her mind was elsewhere, cycling through Marcus's offer and Adrian's test, and the impossible choice between 2 futures. She read Marcus's folder cover to cover. The foundation was legitimate, well-funded, staffed by former regulators and prosecutors who'd gotten tired of watching criminals escape consequences. Their work mattered. It was exactly the kind of systemic change she dreamed about making, but it was reactive. Punishment after the fact, cleaning up messes instead of preventing them. She also read Adrian's sample project, unable to resist the pull of actual analysis. The company's financials looked clean at first glance, but there were patterns in the timing of transactions, clustering of payments that suggested coordination, relationships between vendors that didn't make business sense. Within 3 hours, she'd identified 12 red flags suggesting the company was inflating revenue through circular transactions with shell entities. She wrote it up properly, documented her findings, included recommendations for additional investigation. Then she sat in her apartment, staring at the report and trying to decide what to do with it. Marissa came over Wednesday night with wine and Chinese food and the bluntness that came from years of friendship. "You're overthinking this," she said, sprawled on Lena's couch, with lo mein. "There's a lot to think about." "There's really not. Marcus is offering you a job that lets you keep your soul. Adrian is offering you a job that sells your soul for a premium price. Pick the one that lets you sleep at night." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You just don't like the answer." Marissa pointed her fork at Lena. "You want to work for Adrian because the work is interesting and the money is good and you're still angry about what happened 3 years ago. Working for the guy who destroyed you feels like winning." But it's not winning. It's just different exploitation. Marcus might pay less, but at least you'll be fighting for something instead of fighting for someone's profit margin." Lena picked at her food. "What if fighting for something isn't enough anymore? What if I'm tired of being noble and poor and invisible?" "Then take Adrian's job. Just don't pretend it's anything other than what it is." "Which is?" "A deal with a devil who happens to have good taste in office furniture." They finished eating in silence. After Marissa left, Lena pulled out both folders again, spreading documents across her coffee table like tarot cards. Marcus's offer, purpose, principles, doing work that mattered. Adrian's offer, power, resources, doing work that was interesting. Neither was wrong. Neither was entirely right. Thursday morning arrived too fast. Lena woke before her alarm, showered, dressed in the navy dress again because it was the only thing that felt appropriate for whatever this day would become. She called Adrian at 9. "I finished the analysis," she said when he answered. "And?" "The company is committing fraud, systematic revenue inflation through circular transactions. I documented 12 instances, but there are probably more with deeper investigation. Can you prove it?" "I can show the patterns. Proving intent would require access to internal communications and contracts." "Good enough. Email me the report. I'll bring it by your office." There was a pause. "Why?" "Because I want to tell you in person that I'm not taking your job." Another pause, longer this time. "I see. Come at 11. I'll clear my schedule." He hung up. Lena took the subway downtown for the second time that week, carrying her report and her decision and a hope that she wasn't making a catastrophic mistake. Adrian's assistant showed her up immediately. He was standing at his windows again, hands in his pockets, looking out at a city that bent to his will more often than not. "You're refusing my offer," he said without turning around. "I am." "Why?" "Because working for you means compromising everything I spent 3 years protecting." Now he turned. "Didn't ask you to compromise anything. You didn't have to ask. The job itself is the compromise. Helping clients hide money, structure deals to avoid regulation, operate in ways that are legal but not ethical. I prefer the term strategic optimization. I prefer the term wrong." Adrian smiled, sharp and approving. "That's what makes you valuable. You see the difference even when it's not obvious. Then you understand why I can't work for you." "I understand. I don't agree, but I understand." He moved to his desk, pulled an envelope from a drawer. "This is for you." Lena didn't take it. "I don't want money." "It's not money. It's information. Evidence of Jonathan's theft, properly documented and legally admissible. Give it to Marcus. Let his foundation prosecute the case." "Why would you give me this?" Because you're going to work for Marcus, and he'll need a significant case to justify hiring you at the salary I told you to demand. Adrian set the envelope on the desk between them. Ask for 20% more than he offered. Tell him you have documentation of systematic fraud at a major financial institution. He'll pay it. Lena stared at the envelope. You're helping me negotiate with Marcus? I'm ensuring you're properly compensated. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Fine. I'm helping you. Does that satisfy your need for emotional honesty? Despite everything, Lena almost laughed. You're very strange. I'm very efficient. I wanted you on my team. You're choosing differently. The least I can do is ensure you're valued appropriately wherever you end up. The least you could do is nothing. The least I could do is inadequate. Adrian pushed the envelope toward her. Take it. Destroy Jonathan. Build something that matters. And when you inevitably discover that fighting corruption from outside the system has limitations, call me. The offer doesn't expire. Lena picked up the envelope. It was heavy, thick with documents that would ruin a man who'd spent years ruining others. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this from kindness. Then why are you doing it? Adrian considered the question, his expression unreadable. Because you were collateral damage in a situation you didn't create, and I prefer symmetry. Jonathan damaged you unjustly. Now you get to damage him justly. That's symmetrical. That's revenge. That's mathematics. Lena held his gaze for a long moment, trying to see past the careful control to whatever motivated this man who ran empires and showed no emotion and apparently thought revenge and mathematics were synonyms. I still think you're terrible, she said. I know. And manipulative. Accurate. And I don't trust you. You shouldn't. But I think you're also trying to do something decent in your own twisted way. Don't sentimentalize it. I'm correcting an inefficiency. Lena smiled despite herself. Right, an inefficiency. She turned to leave, got halfway to the door before Adrian spoke again. Lena. She looked back. When you're ready to play offense instead of defense, you know where to find me. I'm not going to be ready. We'll see. Lena left his office, rode the elevator down, emerged onto streets that felt different than they had an hour ago. She had evidence that would destroy Jonathan Reeves. She had leverage to negotiate a better salary with Marcus. She had choices that were actually hers instead of being made for her by circumstances and other people's decisions. She called Marcus from the sidewalk. I want the job, she said when he answered. But we need to discuss salary. Marcus agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Chelsea, neutral territory that smelled like espresso and ambition. Lena arrived first, claiming a table near the back where conversations could happen without being overheard. She spread Adrian's envelope on the table, not opening it, but letting it sit there like evidence of everything that was about to change. Marcus showed up 10 minutes late, looking rumpled in a way that suggested he'd come from somewhere more important. He sat down across from her, glanced at the envelope, raised his eyebrows. That looks official. It is. Lena pushed it toward him. Documentation of systematic theft at Garrison Financial. 10 years of fraudulent transactions, falsified records, money laundering. Everything you'd need to build a prosecution case. Marcus opened the envelope carefully, pulled out the first few pages, scanned them with the practiced eye of someone who knew what financial crimes looked like on paper. This is Jonathan Reeves, he said slowly. It is. Where did you get this? Does it matter? It matters if it was obtained illegally. It wasn't. Someone with legal access chose to share it. Lena leaned forward. You wanted me because I understand how these systems work. This is how they work. People at the top steal with impunity until someone with enough evidence and enough resources decides to stop them. Marcus kept reading, his expression shifting from skeptical to interested to something that looked like hunger. This is solid, he said finally. This could bring down not just Jonathan, but potentially several senior partners, maybe the whole firm. That's what I thought. And you're bringing this to me as what? A signing bonus? I'm bringing it to you as proof that I can do the job you're hiring me for, and as leverage to negotiate a better salary. Marcus laughed, surprised and genuine. Adrian told you to ask for more money, didn't he? He suggested I know my worth. Of course he did. Marcus closed the envelope, set it aside. How much more? Lena named the figure Adrian had mentioned, 20% above the original offer. Marcus didn't even blink. Done. When can you start? I need to give 2 weeks' notice at the nonprofit. Give 1 week. I'll make a donation to cover your salary gap. He extended his hand across the table. Welcome to the team, Lena. She shook his hand, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. This was real now. This was happening. One condition, Marcus said, not releasing her hand yet. You work for the foundation, not for Adrian, not for anyone else. Your loyalty is to the mission, to exposing corruption, to making sure people like Jonathan face consequences. Understood? Understood. I mean it. Adrian is going to keep circling. He's going to offer you projects, ask for favors, try to pull you into his orbit. You need to stay clear. I can handle Adrian. Can you? Marcus let go of her hand. Because from where I'm sitting, he just gave you ammunition to destroy his former business partner and helped you negotiate a higher salary with a competing offer. That's not normal behavior from someone who's supposedly amoral. He said it was about symmetry. It's about investment. He's investing in you for future returns. Marcus's expression was serious now. Be careful, Lena. Adrian Vale doesn't do anything without expecting something back. Lena knew he was right. She also knew it didn't matter because she'd already made her choice and there was no going back now. She gave notice at the nonprofit that afternoon. Sandra took it better than expected, giving Lena a hug that lasted too long and smelled like the lavender soap she always used. I'm happy for you, Sandra said, pulling back but keeping her hands on Lena's shoulders. You deserve this. You deserve everything. I'm sorry to leave you short-staffed. We'll manage. We always manage. Sandra smiled, tired but genuine. Just promise me you won't forget what it's like down here. When you're up there making 6 figures and exposing corruption, remember the people who can't afford lawyers and don't have foundations looking out for them. I won't forget. Yes, you will. Everyone does. But maybe you'll forget slower than most. Lena spent her last week at the nonprofit training her replacement and trying not to think about how easy it was to leave behind work that had kept her alive for 3 years. She'd thought it would hurt more, walking away from the place that had given her employment when no one else would. Instead, it felt like shedding clothes that had never quite fit. The news about Jonathan broke on a Wednesday morning, 2 days before Lena's official start date at the foundation. She woke to her phone exploding with notifications. News alerts, social media mentions, texts from people she hadn't heard from in years. She grabbed her laptop, pulled up the first article her browser suggested. Senior partner at Garrison Financial arrested on fraud charges. The article had photos, Jonathan in handcuffs being led from his home, Christine standing in the doorway looking devastated. A statement from Garrison's legal team expressing shock and promising full cooperation with investigators. Lena read the whole thing twice, then read 3 more articles from different outlets saying essentially the same thing. Federal prosecutors had evidence of systematic theft spanning a decade. Millions of dollars siphoned from client accounts through elaborate schemes designed to look like legitimate operational expenses. The evidence was airtight. The charges were severe. Jonathan was looking at decades in federal prison if convicted. Her phone rang. Adrian. Did you watch the news? He asked without preamble. I'm reading about it now. How does it feel? Lena thought about that. She'd imagined this moment for 3 years. Jonathan's reputation destroyed the way he'd destroyed hers. His life dismantled piece by piece, justice finally catching up to someone who'd thought himself untouchable. She'd expected to feel satisfaction, vindication, the sharp pleasure of watching an enemy fall. Instead, she just felt tired. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I'd be happy. But you're not. I'm relieved. That's different than happy. Revenge rarely delivers the satisfaction people expect, Adrian said. It's why I prefer pragmatism over punishment. The results are more predictable. Is that why you gave me the evidence? Because revenge is unsatisfying? I gave you the evidence because it served multiple purposes efficiently. Your satisfaction was incidental. Lena almost smiled. You're terrible at emotional support. I don't provide emotional support. I provide accurate analysis and strategic advantage. Same thing. It's absolutely not the same thing. They were quiet for a moment. Lena could hear city noise in the background of Adrian's call. He was outside somewhere, walking, moving through the world while casually discussing the destruction of a man's life. "Thank you," Lena said finally. "For what?" "For the evidence. For helping Marcus hire me. For—" She struggled to find words. "For caring enough to make it right even though you don't do things from kindness." "I don't." "I know, but thank you anyway." Adrian was quiet then. "You start at the foundation Friday." "I do." "Don't waste it. Marcus is giving you resources and authority most people spend careers earning. Use them properly." "I will." "And Lena?" "Yes?" "The offer still stands. When you're ready for offense instead of defense, call me." "I'm not going to call you." "We'll see." He hung up. Lena sat in her apartment surrounded by news about Jonathan's arrest, thinking about symmetry and revenge, and the strange man who claimed not to care about either but had orchestrated both anyway. Her phone buzzed with the text from Marissa. "Holy shit, did you see the news?" Lena typed back, "I saw." "This is because of you, isn't it?" "It's because he was a criminal who got caught." "Don't be modest, it's unbecoming. We're celebrating. Drinks tonight. No arguments." They met at the Brooklyn bar where Lena had spent Wednesday evenings for 3 years, surrounded by other people who'd been chewed up by systems that valued profit over people. The news was already circulating. Jonathan's arrest was all anyone wanted to talk about. Marcus from the journalism group bought Lena a drink. Then another. People she barely knew congratulated her like she'd personally slapped handcuffs on Jonathan herself. "You did this, someone said. A woman named Rita, who'd been fired from a pharmaceutical company for reporting safety violations. "I didn't do anything," Lena protested. "Federal prosecutors did this. But you gave them the evidence. You're the reason it happened. I just handed over documents. Someone else did the real work." Marissa leaned close, her breath sharp with whiskey. "Stop minimizing. You spent 3 years being invisible. Let yourself be visible for one damn night." So Lena let herself be visible, let people buy her drinks and ask her questions, and treat her like she'd accomplished something significant. It felt strange and uncomfortable, and good, in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. Around midnight, when the bar was loud and warm and full of people who understood what it meant to survive systems designed to crush you, Lena's phone rang. Unknown number. She stepped outside to answer, the night air cold against skin flushed with alcohol and attention. "Hello?" "Lena Carter?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Yes?" "This is Christine Reeves." Lena's grip tightened on her phone. "Christine, I know I have no right to call you. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to—" Her voice cracked. "Jonathan was arrested this morning. They took him from our home in handcuffs. The news was there. Everyone saw." "I know." "Did you do this?" Lena could lie, should lie, but she was tired of lying, and Christine had apologized at the gala, and sometimes honesty was the only decent option. "I provided evidence to people who could use it properly," Lena said. "What they did with it was their choice." Christine was crying now, quiet sobs that carried through the phone. "He says you fabricated everything, that you're trying to destroy him out of revenge. He's lying." "I know." The admission was barely audible. "I've known for years. I didn't want to know. Do you understand? It was easier to believe his version than to accept what he was." "I understand." "Do you? Do you understand what it's like to build your entire life around someone and then discover they're not who you thought? That everything you built was built on lies?" Lena thought about her career at Garrison, her faith in Jonathan's mentorship, her belief that hard work and integrity would be enough. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I understand." Christine cried harder. "I'm going to lose everything. The house, the social standing, the life I spent 20 years creating. People are already calling, canceling lunches, removing me from boards. I'm being erased. Welcome to the club." It came out harsher than Lena intended, but Christine didn't flinch. "I deserve that," she said. "I deserve all of it. I should have spoken up 3 years ago. I should have defended you. I should have been brave. But you weren't. No. Christine's voice steadied slightly. But I'm trying to be now. I gave a statement to federal prosecutors about the money, about Jonathan's lies, about everything I knew and pretended not to know. My lawyer says it will help the case against him. Lena processed this. You're testifying against your husband. I'm testifying to the truth, finally. Christine laughed, broken and bitter. It's probably too late. For forgiveness, for redemption, for any of it. But at least I'm doing it. It's not too late, isn't it? I don't know, Lena admitted. But doing the right thing late is still better than never doing it at all. They were quiet for a moment, two women connected by a man who'd destroyed them both in different ways. I should go, Christine said. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that you were brave when I was a coward. Christine, don't be kind to me. I don't deserve it. A pause. But maybe someday I will. Maybe if I keep being brave, eventually it will matter. She hung up before Lena could respond. Lena stood on the sidewalk outside the bar, holding her phone and trying to process a conversation that felt like closure for something she hadn't realized needed closing. Friday arrived with the weight of a beginning. Lena dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard, confident but not arrogant. She took the subway to the foundation's offices in a building that was nice without being ostentatious, modern without being cold. Marcus met her in the lobby personally, grinning like he'd won something. Ready for your first day? I have no idea. Perfect. Fake it until you don't have to. He gave her a tour, open floor plan, glass offices, whiteboards covered with organizational charts and case timelines. People looked up as they passed, some nodding recognition, others clearly trying to place her. You're already semi-famous, Marcus said. The woman who brought down Jonathan Reeves. It's good for morale. Shows the work we do matters. I didn't bring him down. Evidence and prosecutors did. You provided the evidence. Stop being modest. It makes people uncomfortable. Her office was in a corner with windows that looked out over the city. Not as high up as Adrian's office, not as pristine, but hers. Real, permanent. A desk with her name on a placard. A computer already set up with her login credentials. A stack of files marked current investigations, sitting beside a note that said, Welcome to the fight, M. Lena sat in her chair, swiveled to face the windows, looked out at a city that had crushed her and was now giving her another chance. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. First day? Don't waste it. She didn't respond, just set her phone aside and pulled the first file from the stack. The weeks that followed were a blur of learning and adjustment. Lena had thought she understood financial investigation, but working at the foundation was different than analyzing transactions for Garrison. She wasn't looking for profitable opportunities. She was looking for patterns of abuse, systematic exploitation, institutional failures. She was good at it, better than good. Within a month, she'd identified irregularities at 3 separate firms that Marcus's team had missed. Within 2 months, she'd built cases that led to regulatory investigations. Within 3 months, she'd become the person everyone consulted when they needed someone to see what wasn't obvious. Her team was small. 4 analysts, all younger than her, all smart in ways that made her feel simultaneously old and energized. They asked good questions, challenged her assumptions, caught mistakes she might have missed. Working with them reminded Lena why she'd loved finance in the first place. Not for the money or prestige, but for the puzzle of it, the patterns hiding in numbers, the stories transactions told about human behavior. You're smiling, Marcus said one afternoon, appearing in her office doorway with coffee. Am I? You are. It's unsettling. I've known you for 3 months, and this is the first time I've seen you look happy. Lena accepted the coffee. I like the work. I can tell. You're also terrifying my analysts. They think you never sleep. I sleep plenty. You sent an email at 2 this morning. I had an idea. Have ideas during business hours. You're making everyone else look bad. But Marcus was grinning. Seriously, though, you're doing excellent work. Better than I expected, and I expected a lot. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep doing it. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and you're speaking at the annual conference in December about the Garrison case and how we approach the investigation. Måste vi skapa man outside. I don't do public speaking. You do now. It's in 3 months. Prepare accordingly. He left before Lena could argue. The conference was in December at a hotel in Midtown that tried very hard to be elegant and mostly succeeded. Lena had prepared remarks, practiced in her apartment mirror, rewritten her speech 4 times until Marissa physically took away her laptop. It's good, Marissa had insisted. Stop obsessing. Just tell them what you did and why it mattered. Easy to say. Harder to do when this ballroom held 300 people who all worked in finance or regulation or law enforcement, all of whom understood corruption intellectually, but few of whom had experienced it personally. Lena stood backstage waiting for her introduction, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it. Marcus appeared beside her. You look terrified. I am terrified. Good. Terror means you care. He squeezed her shoulder. You've got this. Just be honest. Talk about what happened to you, what you learned, why the work matters. They'll listen. What if they don't? Then they're idiots, and we don't care about idiots. Her introduction came. Applause. Lights. A podium with a microphone and a teleprompter showing her carefully prepared remarks. Lena walked out into the lights and promptly forgot every word she'd written. The audience waited, expectant. I'm supposed to talk about the Garrison financial investigation, Lena said, her voice echoing through speakers. About how we built the case, what strategies we used, what made it successful. She paused, looked out at 300 faces she couldn't quite see past the stage lights. But that's not the real story, she continued. The real story is that 3 years ago, I reported fraud and got destroyed for it. I lost my job, my reputation, my career. I spent 3 years working for barely minimum wage and trying to remember why integrity had seemed like a good idea. The room was very quiet now. The Garrison case succeeded because I got lucky, because someone with resources decided to help me, because evidence I couldn't use alone ended up in the hands of people who could, but thousands of people report fraud every year and don't get lucky. They just get destroyed and stay destroyed. Lena gripped the podium. So yes, I'll tell you how we investigated Garrison, but first I want to tell you why it matters that we did. Because our financial system is set up to protect people at the top and punish people who threaten them. Because whistleblowers get blacklisted while criminals get promoted. Because the cost of doing the right thing is usually higher than most people can afford to pay. She spoke for 20 minutes about corruption and courage and the institutional failures that made both possible. She forgot her prepared remarks entirely, speaking from memory and anger and 3 years of experience being invisible. When she finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. People stood. Lena stood at the podium feeling exposed and raw and more alive than she'd felt in years. She fielded questions for 30 minutes afterward, technical questions about investigation methodology, personal questions about how she'd survived, philosophical questions about what needed to change. She answered all of them honestly, sometimes brutally so, and the audience responded like they'd been waiting for someone to tell them the truth instead of the sanitized version. Afterward, people swarmed her. Business cards, congratulations, questions she was too overwhelmed to answer properly. Marcus rescued her eventually, steering her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. That was not the speech you showed me, he said. I know. I'm sorry. That was better. That was real. He was grinning again. You're going to get 50 job offers from that speech. I already have a job. Then you'll get 50 offers to speak at other conferences. You're a story now, Lena. People love a comeback story. Lena didn't want to be a story. She wanted to be good at her job and useful and maybe eventually important in ways that mattered. But she'd learned over the past 3 months that you didn't always get to choose how people saw you. You just got to choose whether to care. She was working on not caring. The reception afterward was champagne and small talk and networking that Lena had gotten better at, but still found exhausting. She was standing near a window taking a break from conversation when someone appeared beside her. Adrian. That was quite a speech, he said, looking out at the city instead of at her. What are you doing here? Marcus invited me. We collaborate occasionally on projects requiring discretion. You and Marcus collaborate? We have complementary interests. He exposes criminals. I ensure my clients don't become criminals worth exposing. Synergy. Adrian sipped his champagne. You were compelling up there. I forgot my whole speech. The prepared speech would have been adequate. What you delivered was memorable. There's a difference. Despite herself, Lena felt pleased. Are you complimenting me? I'm making an accurate assessment. Same thing. Still not the same thing. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the reception unfold below them. Lena noticed people glancing their way, curious about why she was talking to Adrian Vale, what it meant that he was talking to her. People are staring, she said. People always stare. It's tedious, but unavoidable. Doesn't it bother you? Why would it bother me? Their attention doesn't affect my decisions. Lena wished she had that kind of confidence, that ability to exist in spaces without caring what anyone thought. How's the foundation work? Adrian asked. Good, challenging, important. Boring? Sometimes. You miss the complexity. It wasn't a question. I miss feeling like the work is hard enough to be interesting, Lena admitted. A lot of what we investigate is obvious fraud, people being greedy and stupid and not covering their tracks well. It doesn't require the kind of analysis I'm good at, so you're underutilized. I'm appropriately utilized for mission-driven work. Not everything needs to be intellectually stimulating. No, but you're happier when it is. Adrian was right, and Lena hated that he was right. I'm not leaving the foundation, she said. I didn't suggest you should, but you're thinking it. I'm thinking you have skills being used at 60% capacity when they could be used at full capacity, doing work that's both interesting and impactful. He finally turned to look at her. I'm also thinking you're not ready to hear that yet, so I'll wait. For what? For you to get tired of playing defense. For you to want the complexity back. For you to realize fighting corruption reactively is less effective than preventing it proactively. That sounds like a pitch. It's an observation. The pitch comes later when you're ready. I'm not going to be ready. Adrian smiled, small and knowing. We'll see. He walked away before Lena could argue, disappearing into the crowd with the same silent efficiency he did everything. Lena stayed by the window, holding champagne she wasn't drinking, thinking about capacity and complexity and whether doing good work was enough if it wasn't the hardest work she could do. She pushed the thought away. She'd made her choice. She was fighting for something that mattered, exposing criminals, making the system slightly less broken. That was enough. It had to be enough. But 3 months later, when Marcus assigned her to investigate a small regional bank for potentially fraudulent lending practices, work that was important but not challenging, necessary but not interesting, Lena found herself thinking about Adrian's words. 60% capacity, playing defense, waiting to be ready. She pushed those thoughts away too, but they kept coming back, persistent and uncomfortable and increasingly hard to ignore. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March, 6 months after Lena's speech at the conference. She was reviewing loan documents from the regional bank case, her third investigation of small-scale lending fraud in as many months, when her phone rang. Adrian's name on the screen. She'd been expecting this call for weeks, maybe months. Had rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd decline whatever he was offering, why she was committed to the Foundation's mission. I'm working, she answered instead. On the regional bank case, predatory lending disguised as community development loans. How do you... She stopped. Of course you know. It's straightforward fraud. Your analyst could handle it without supervision. My analyst is 24 and still learning. Your analyst is competent and you're bored. Adrian's voice was matter of fact. I have a project that requires your specific skills. Interested? No. You didn't ask what it is. I don't need to. I told you 6 months ago, I'm not working for you. I'm not asking you to work for me. I'm asking you to consult on a single project. 3 weeks, specific scope, compensation equal to 6 months of your current salary. Lena set down the loan document she'd been pretending to read. What's the project? A client is considering acquiring a healthcare company. The financials look clean, but something feels off. I need someone who can identify what I'm sensing but can't prove. That sounds like due diligence. You have people for that. I have people who are technically competent. I don't have people who see patterns the way you do. He paused. This company provides medical services to low-income communities. If they're committing fraud, people are being harmed in ways that matter beyond financial losses. It was a calculated appeal, and Lena knew it. Adrian had identified exactly what would make her interested, fraud that hurt vulnerable people, and was using it deliberately. "Send me the preliminary information," she said. "I'll look at it. No promises. I'll have it to you within the hour." "Adrian?" "Yes?" "This doesn't mean I'm leaving the foundation." "I know. And it doesn't mean I'm open to other projects after this." "Understood. I mean it. I believe you." His tone suggested he believed nothing of the sort. "Check your email in an hour." He hung up. Lena sat staring at her phone, at the loan document spread across her desk, at the choice she was making without quite admitting she was making it. Marcus appeared in her doorway as if summoned. "You look conflicted." "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." He came in, closed the door behind him. "What's going on?" Lena considered lying properly, then decided against it. Marcus deserved honesty, even when honesty was uncomfortable. "Adrian offered me a consulting project." Marcus's expression didn't change. "And you're considering it." "I'm looking at the information. That's all." "That's not all, and we both know it." Marcus sat in the chair across from her desk. "You've been restless for months. The work here isn't challenging you anymore. The work here matters. Work can matter and still be boring. Those aren't mutually exclusive." He leaned back. "I'm not going to tell you not to take Adrian's project. You're an adult. You can make your own decisions. But I'm going to remind you why you chose to work here in the first place." "I remember why." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you're forgetting. You took this job because you wanted to fight corruption from a position of integrity, because you wanted work that aligned with your principles instead of compromising them. One consulting project doesn't compromise my principles. No, but it's a slope, and slopes are slippery." Marcus stood. "Adrian is brilliant at what he does. He's also brilliant at identifying what people want and making them think they can have it without consequences. Be careful you don't wake up one day working for someone you swore you'd never work for." He left before Lena could respond. The information from Adrian arrived 45 minutes later. Lena told herself she was just looking, just being thorough, just satisfying curiosity. She opened the files. 3 hours later, she'd found the pattern. The healthcare company was billing Medicare for services that technically happened but weren't medically necessary. They were scheduling appointments with low-income patients, performing cursory examinations, billing for comprehensive care. The individual frauds were small, $50 here, $200 there, but scaled across thousands of patients over several years, it added up to millions. Millions stolen from a program designed to help vulnerable people disguised as legitimate care. Lena documented everything, wrote up her analysis with the same precision she'd used at Garrison, at the foundation, everywhere she'd worked. Then she sat staring at her findings and trying to decide what to do with them. She could give them to Adrian, take the consulting fee, let him decide what happened next. Or she could give them to Marcus, let the foundation build a case, pursue prosecution through proper channels. Or she could do both. Her phone rang. Adrian, like he knew she'd finished. "You found it," he said. "How do you know I found anything?" "Because you're brilliant, and I gave you enough information to work with." "What did you find?" Lena told him. Explained the billing patterns, the scope of the fraud, the systematic exploitation of patients who trusted the company to provide actual care. Adrian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Excellent work," he said finally. "I'll terminate the acquisition and refer the findings to the appropriate authorities." "Just like that?" "Just like that. I don't invest in fraudulent operations regardless of profitability. It's poor risk management." "You're really going to report them?" "I'm really going to ensure they face consequences for harming vulnerable populations while stealing from federal programs." "Yes." He paused. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I don't know what I thought." "You thought I'm amoral and only care about profit," which is partially accurate but incomplete. I'm pragmatic and risk-averse. Companies that commit systematic fraud are liabilities. I eliminate liabilities. Lena wanted to argue that pragmatism wasn't morality, that doing the right thing for the wrong reasons didn't count. But results mattered more than motivations. The healthcare company would face consequences. Patients would be protected. The fraud would stop. "I'll send you my full report," she said. I'll transfer your consulting fee tonight. I don't want the money. That's impractical. You did work. You deserve compensation. Donate it to the foundation. They can use it for cases like this. Adrian laughed, genuine and surprised. You're determined to maintain your principles even when taking money from morally ambiguous sources. I'm determined to do the right thing even when the right thing is complicated. That's what makes you valuable. His tone shifted, became more serious. Lena, I have another project. Larger scope, longer timeline, significantly more complex. Interested? No. It's a financial network supporting human trafficking operations. I need someone who can trace the money, identify the participants, build a case that leads to prosecutions. Lena's refusal died in her throat. That's not a consulting project, she said slowly. That's a full investigation. Yes, that would take months, maybe longer. 6 months minimum, possibly a year, depending on complexity. I have a job, Adrian, a job I'm committed to. A job that's using 60% of your capacity on work that's important but not challenging. Meanwhile, people are being trafficked, and the financial systems enabling it are operating freely because no one has the skills and resources to stop them. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You can keep doing good work that doesn't challenge you, or you can do extraordinary work that might actually change things. Your choice. Lena wanted to hang up, wanted to tell him he was manipulative and wrong, and she wasn't going to abandon the foundation for work that compromised everything she stood for. Send me the preliminary information, she heard herself say. I'll look at it. I'll have it to you tomorrow. This doesn't mean, I know what it doesn't mean. Look at the information anyway. He hung up. Lena sat in her office, surrounded by loan documents from a case that mattered but didn't excite her, thinking about human trafficking and financial networks and the question she'd been avoiding for months. Was doing good work enough if she could be doing better work somewhere else? She didn't go home that night. Instead, she worked through the regional bank case with focused intensity, documenting every instance of predatory lending, building an airtight case that any prosecutor could use. By 3 a.m, she'd finished. She sent the complete file to Marcus with a note. This is ready for prosecution. My analyst can handle any follow-up questions. Then she went home, slept for 4 hours, and woke to find Adrian's new project information in her inbox. She shouldn't have opened it. She opened it anyway. The trafficking network was sophisticated, moving money through legitimate businesses and offshore accounts in patterns designed to look like normal commercial activity. The scale was massive, millions of dollars, multiple countries, hundreds of victims. The people running it were careful, experienced, protected by layers of legal structure and geographic complexity. But they'd made mistakes. Small ones, barely visible. The kind of mistakes only someone looking for specific patterns would notice. Lena noticed. She spent the entire day analyzing the information, forgetting to eat, ignoring her phone, following trails of transactions that revealed a network more extensive than the preliminary information suggested. By evening, she'd mapped the basic structure. By midnight, she'd identified 12 key participants. By 3 a.m, she'd found the weak points where the whole network could be vulnerable. This was the kind of work she was good at, the kind that required seeing patterns others missed, making connections that weren't obvious, building cases that could withstand scrutiny. This was work that mattered in ways that went beyond financial fraud. Marissa showed up at Lena's apartment Wednesday evening with wine and the kind of concerned expression that suggested she'd been texted by someone worried. Marcus called me, Marissa said, setting down the wine. He's worried you're about to do something stupid. I'm not doing anything. You're considering Adrian's trafficking investigation. I'm looking at information, which is the first step toward doing something stupid. Marissa poured wine for both of them. Talk to me. What's going on? Lena told her everything, the healthcare fraud, the trafficking network, the months of feeling underutilized at the foundation, the growing sense that she was playing it safe when she could be doing more. Marissa listened without interrupting, then said, You want to take Adrian's project. I want the work to matter and be challenging simultaneously. Is that so wrong? It's not wrong. It's just complicated. Marissa sipped her wine. Here's what I think is happening. You spent 3 years being destroyed, then you spent 6 months being vindicated and doing good work. And now you're remembering what it felt like before everything fell apart, when you were ambitious and driven and using your full capacity. That's not, let me finish. You're remembering who you were, and you're realizing who you are now isn't the same person. The work at the foundation is good work, but it's safe work. It doesn't push you. It doesn't scare you. And I think you're starting to realize that playing it safe isn't actually what you want. Lena stared at her wine glass. I'm scared of becoming who I was before. That person was arrogant and naive and believed merit would protect her. That person was also brilliant and ambitious and willing to fight for what mattered. You don't have to choose between the naive version and the cautious version. You can be smart about risk without avoiding it completely. What if I'm making a mistake? Then you make a mistake. You've survived worse. Marissa set down her glass. But I don't think this is a mistake. I think you're finally admitting what you want instead of settling for what's safe. Lena met with Marcus the next morning in his office. He looked tired, probably because she'd kept him up worrying. I'm considering Adrian's trafficking investigation, she said without preamble. Marcus nodded slowly. I figured. I'm not leaving the foundation permanently, but I need to take a leave of absence, 6 months, maybe longer. To work for Adrian Vale. To work on a case that matters. Adrian is facilitating it, but the work is independent. Nothing about Adrian is independent. Marcus leaned back in his chair. But I'm not going to try to stop you. You're an adult. You get to make your own choices, even when they're questionable. You think this is questionable? I think Adrian is excellent at making his interests look like your principles. I think he's been investing in you for months, maybe years, waiting for the right moment to pull you into his orbit. I think this trafficking case is real and important and also perfectly designed to make you feel like working for him is the ethical choice. What if it is the ethical choice? Then do it. Just don't pretend it's anything other than what it is. You choosing complexity and challenge over safety and principles. The words stung because they were partially true. I'm not abandoning my principles, Lena said. I hope not, but principles get compromised in small ways, through justifications that sound reasonable at the time. Be careful you don't justify yourself into becoming someone you don't recognize. Lena left his office feeling uncertain and defensive and determined simultaneously. She called Adrian from the elevator. I'll take the trafficking case, she said when he answered. 6 months, specific scope, full independence on methodology and findings. Agreed. I want oversight from the foundation. Marcus gets copies of everything I find, opportunity to review my work, authority to raise concerns. Acceptable. And when this is done, we're done. No more projects, no more consulting, no gradual transition into your organization. If that's what you want, it's what I want. Then that's what you'll have. He paused. When can you start? 2 weeks. I need to finish my current cases and transition my team. 2 weeks works. I'll have everything ready. Lena hung up and stood in the elevator feeling like she'd just made either the best decision of her life or the worst. Time would tell which. The next 6 months were the hardest work Lena had ever done. The trafficking network was more extensive than initial analysis suggested, reaching into legitimate businesses, government contracts, financial institutions that should have caught the patterns, but didn't. Lena worked from Adrian's offices because she needed access to databases and resources the foundation couldn't provide. She had her own space, her own team of analysts who reported to her directly, complete independence on methodology. Adrian checked in weekly, reviewing her findings, asking questions that pushed her thinking, providing resources when she hit walls. He never told her what to do, never pressured her to reach specific conclusions, never interfered with her work beyond ensuring she had what she needed. It was unsettling how easy it was to work with him. You're surprised I'm not controlling, Adrian observed one afternoon when Lena mentioned this. I expected more micromanagement. Micromanagement is inefficient. I hired you because you're excellent at this work. Interfering would only make you less excellent. He reviewed the report she'd just delivered. This is good. Better than good. You've identified patterns my team missed entirely. Your team is focused on profit. I'm focused on harm. Different priorities reveal different patterns. He looked up from the report. How are you holding up? I'm fine. You're working 16-hour days and sleeping in your office half the time. That's not fine. It's necessary. It's unsustainable. Adrian closed the report. Take the weekend. Go somewhere without cell service. Come back Monday with fresh perspective. I can't take a weekend. The case will still be here Monday. You won't be useful if you burn out. His tone was firm. This is not a suggestion. Lena wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She spent the weekend at Marissa's place, sleeping 14 hours straight, eating real food, remembering what it felt like to exist as something other than an investigation. You look terrible, Marissa said Saturday morning over coffee. Thank you. I'm serious. You're working yourself into the ground. The work matters. The work will matter just as much if you take care of yourself while doing it. Marissa studied her. Are you okay? Really okay? Lena thought about that. I'm exhausted and frustrated, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I'm actually making a difference or just documenting horror for wealthy people who will use the information strategically. But the work is the hardest thing I've ever done, and I'm good at it. And when we're finished, people who are being trafficked will have a chance at freedom they wouldn't have otherwise. Lena set down her coffee. So, yes, I'm okay. 4 months into the investigation, Lena identified the network's financial hub, a bank in Luxembourg that processed transactions for 12 front companies across 6 countries. She documented everything, built a case that connected each transaction to specific criminal activities, identified the people responsible for operating the network. It was airtight, comprehensive, the kind of work that would lead to prosecutions across multiple jurisdictions. She presented her findings to Adrian and Marcus simultaneously in a meeting she'd insisted happen at the Foundation's offices. Marcus reviewed the documentation in silence, his expression shifting from skeptical to impressed to something that looked like respect. This is extraordinary work, he said finally. It's complete work, Lena corrected. Everything you need for prosecution is documented. The Foundation can take it from here. You're not going to see it through? My contract was to build the case, not prosecute it. That's the Foundation's expertise. Marcus looked at Adrian. You're okay with this? I'm okay with Lena delivering exactly what we agreed she'd deliver. Adrian stood. The Foundation has the resources to pursue prosecution. My role ends here. Just like that? Just like that. Marcus still looked suspicious, but he accepted the documentation and promised to assign a full team to the prosecution. After he left, Adrian and Lena stood in the Foundation's conference room, looking at 6 months of work compiled into binders and hard drives. Thank you, Lena said. For what? For letting me do this work without compromising it, for not trying to control the outcome or use it strategically. I told you I wouldn't interfere. I keep my word. I know, Lena struggled for words. I expected working with you to feel like a compromise. It didn't. Good. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. What are you doing next? Going back to the Foundation full-time, finishing what I started. Are you sure that's what you want? I'm sure that's what I committed to. Adrian studied her with that analytical gaze she'd learned to recognize. Commitment and desire aren't always the same thing. They are for me. If you say so. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I just sent you information on another project. Look at it when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline, just an option if you want it. Adrian, I know. You're committed to the Foundation. You're not interested in ongoing work with me. You've made your choice. He smiled, small and knowing. Just look at the information anyway. Then he left before Lena could argue. She went back to the Foundation the following week with the intention of reclaiming her old position and settling back into the important but safe work she'd been doing before. It lasted 3 days before she opened Adrian's email. The project was a financial network supporting illegal deforestation in protected forests. Complex, international, requiring exactly the kind of analysis she'd just spent 6 months perfecting. Lena stared at the information, then closed her laptop and went to find Marcus. He was in his office, reviewing case files, looking tired in the way everyone at the Foundation looked tired, the exhaustion that came from fighting systems designed to grind you down. I need to talk to you, Lena said. Marcus looked up. This sounds ominous. I'm leaving the foundation. His expression didn't change. To work for Adrian. To work on cases that require my specific skills. Adrian facilitates access and resources, but the work is independent. That's what you told yourself about the trafficking case, too. And I was right. The work was independent. The results mattered. We stopped a network that was hurting people. And now you're doing it again because Adrian has an endless supply of compelling projects that require your skills. Lena sat down across from him. Yes, you're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She leaned forward. Marcus, you gave me a chance when no one else would. You gave me meaningful work and treated me with respect and helped me remember why integrity matters. I'm grateful for that. But the work here isn't using my full capacity anymore. So you're leaving to chase complexity instead of meaning. I'm leaving to do work that's both complex and meaningful. I'm leaving because I've spent too much of my life playing it safe, and I'm tired of being small when I could be significant. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I can't stop you, but I can tell you that working with Adrian will change you in ways you won't notice until it's too late. He's brilliant at making compromise look like pragmatism. I know what I'm doing. No one ever thinks they're being compromised. That's how compromise works. Marcus stood, extended his hand. But you're right that it's your choice. Good luck, Lena. I hope you find what you're looking for. They shook hands, and Lena left the foundation for the second time, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or finally becoming who she was supposed to be. A year later, Lena stood on the same stage where she'd delivered her speech about corruption and courage, except this time she wasn't representing the foundation. She was representing herself. The conference was larger this year, 500 people instead of 300, held in a ballroom that glittered with wealth and influence. Her introduction was longer than it had been last time. Director of Independent Investigations, former financial analyst, the woman who'd exposed the Garrison fraud, dismantled a human trafficking network, shut down illegal deforestation operations across 3 continents, the woman who'd learned to stop being small. Lena walked onto the stage in a suit that cost more than the dress she'd rented for the gala 2 years ago, carrying confidence she'd earned instead of borrowed. 2 years ago, she began, I stood on a stage like this and talked about being destroyed for doing the right thing, about losing everything and surviving anyway, about how our systems protect criminals and punish whistleblowers. She paused, looked out at the audience. I still believe all of that, but I've learned something else since then. I've learned that you can work within broken systems without being broken by them, that you can use resources from morally ambiguous sources to do ethically clear work, that compromise and integrity aren't always opposites. There was shifting in the audience, people uncomfortable with what she was saying. Good. I work with Adrian Vale now, Lena continued. Some of you think that means I've sold out, that I've abandoned my principles for better pay and more interesting work. Maybe you're right. But here's what I know. In the last year, my work has led to 17 prosecutions, freed hundreds of trafficking victims, protected thousands of acres of forest, and exposed corruption that would have continued indefinitely without intervention. She let that sink in. Could I have done that work from the foundation? Maybe, but I couldn't have done it as effectively or as quickly or with the same access to resources and information. So yes, I work with someone who operates in gray areas. Yes, I take money from sources that make some people uncomfortable. And yes, I've made compromises I wouldn't have made 2 years ago. Lena's voice strengthened. But I've also learned that purity is a luxury most people can't afford. That doing perfect work that helps no one is worse than doing imperfect work that changes lives. That sometimes the most ethical choice is the complicated one. The applause was divided, some enthusiastic, some reluctant, some absent entirely. Lena didn't care. She took questions for 40 minutes, defending her choices, explaining her methodology, refusing to apologize for working with Adrian, or for believing that impact mattered more than perception. Afterward, people approached her with the same mix of congratulation and judgment she'd received all year. She handled both with the same practiced grace. Marcus appeared near the end of the reception, holding champagne and looking older than he had a year ago. That was quite a speech, he said. You hated it. I disagreed with it. That's different. He sipped his champagne. But I also can't argue with your results. You've done extraordinary work this year. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not sure it's a compliment. Marcus smiled, tired but genuine. You've changed, Lena. You're harder than you were. More pragmatic. Less idealistic. Is that bad? I don't know. Ask me in 10 years when we see who you've become. He walked away before Lena could respond. She found Adrian on the terrace, the same terrace where this had all started 2 years ago, where he'd told her the truth about Jonathan and offered her the first glimpse of what visibility could look like. You were honest up there, Adrian said without preamble. I'm tired of performing for people who'll judge me regardless of what I say. Good. Authenticity is more sustainable than performance. He turned to look at her. How do you feel? Lena thought about that. 2 years ago, she'd been invisible, broken, barely surviving. Now she was visible, successful, doing work that mattered in measurable ways. She'd also become someone who worked with morally ambiguous people, who made pragmatic choices that prioritized impact over purity, who'd learned to live with complexity instead of demanding simple answers. I feel like I'm finally using my full capacity, she said. I feel like I'm doing work that's both challenging and meaningful. I feel like I'm not apologizing for existing anymore. But I also feel like I've lost something. Some certainty about who I am and what I stand for. Some clarity about right and wrong. That's called growth. It's uncomfortable but necessary. Or it's called compromise. It's hard to tell the difference. Adrian was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city lights. I think compromise is when you give up your values for something you want. Growth is when you refine your values to match what you've learned. You haven't given up fighting corruption or helping people. You've just learned to do it more effectively. That sounds like rationalization. Maybe. Or maybe it's the truth. He turned to face her fully. Are you happy, Lena? The question caught her off guard. Was she happy? She was successful, respected, doing important work, living in a better apartment, earning real money, using skills she'd thought were lost forever. She was also tired, constantly defending her choices, missing the simplicity of knowing she was unquestionably on the right side. I don't know if I'm happy, she admitted, but I'm alive in ways I wasn't before. I'm taking up space instead of shrinking. I'm choosing what I want instead of accepting what's offered. That's a start. Is it enough? That's for you to decide. No one else can answer that question. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as enemy and victim and had somehow become something else entirely. Not quite friends, not quite partners, but two people who understood each other in ways that transcended simple categories. Thank you, Lena said finally. For what? For seeing me when everyone else was determined I stay invisible. For giving me opportunities when I'd forgotten I deserved them. For teaching me that complexity isn't the same as compromise. I didn't teach you anything. You learned it yourself. I just provided the environment. Still, thank you. Adrian nodded once, formal and final. Then he said something that surprised her. You've exceeded my expectations. Not many people do that. Is that a compliment? It's an accurate assessment. Lena laughed. Of course it is. 6 months after the conference, Lena sat in her office reviewing a case that had consumed the last 4 months of her life. Financial fraud at a pharmaceutical company that was selling counterfeit medications in developing countries. She'd traced the money, identified the participants, documented everything with the precision that had become her signature. The case was ready for prosecution. She called the appropriate authorities, handed over her findings, and watched as arrests happened within days. Then she sat in her office feeling hollow. The work mattered. It always mattered. But she'd been doing this for 2 years now, identifying corruption, building cases, watching prosecutions happen, and she was starting to wonder what came next. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Lena Carter? A woman's voice, young and nervous. Yes? My name is Rachel Torres. I'm a financial analyst at Davidson Securities. I found something I think might be fraud, but I don't know what to do about it. Lena's grip tightened on her phone. She knew this voice. Heard it in her own head from 3 years ago, scared and uncertain and hoping someone would help. Tell me what you found, Lena said. Rachel explained. Irregular transactions, offshore accounts, patterns that didn't make sense. The classic signs of money laundering, hidden in complex financial structures. She'd reported it to her supervisor. Her supervisor had told her to let it go. I don't know if I should push further, Rachel said. I don't want to lose my job, but if this is real fraud and I stay quiet, then you become complicit, Lena finished. I know, I've been exactly where you are. What did you do? Lena thought about everything that had happened since she'd made the choice to report fraud at Garrison. The destruction, the rebuilding, the compromises, the growth. I reported it, she said. I lost everything, and it took years to rebuild. But I'd make the same choice again because staying silent was worse than any consequence of speaking up. That's not very reassuring. I'm not trying to be reassuring. I'm trying to be honest. Lena leaned back in her chair. But here's what I can offer. Send me your evidence. I'll review it independently. If it's legitimate fraud, I'll help you build a case that's airtight. I'll connect you with lawyers who can protect you. I'll make sure you're not facing this alone. Really? Really. Because someone should have done that for me, and they didn't, so I'm going to do it for you. Rachel sent the information within an hour. Lena spent the weekend reviewing it, confirming the fraud, documenting everything properly. Then she called Rachel back. It's real, Lena said, and it's bad, but we can stop it without destroying you in the process. How? By being smarter than I was, by building the case before we report it, by making sure you're protected and the evidence is undeniable. They worked together for 3 months. Lena taught Rachel how to document fraud properly, how to protect herself legally, how to build cases that could withstand scrutiny. When they finally reported it, the prosecution was swift. The criminals were arrested. Rachel kept her job and her reputation. And Lena realized she'd found what came next. She started a consulting firm that specialized in helping whistleblowers, people who'd found fraud and didn't know how to report it safely, people who needed expertise and protection and someone who understood what they were risking. She worked with Adrian's resources, the foundation's expertise, her own hard-earned knowledge of how to fight corruption without being destroyed by the fight. It wasn't perfect. She still made compromises, still worked in gray areas, still questioned whether she was doing enough or doing it right. But she was helping people who needed help, using skills that had once been used against her to protect others from the same fate. A year after starting the firm, Lena was invited to speak at another conference. The same ballroom, the same stage, but this time she wasn't defending her choices or explaining her compromises. She was talking about what she'd built. 3 years ago, she said to an audience that had grown from 300 to 800, I was destroyed for reporting fraud. 2 years ago, I learned to work within broken systems to fix them. Now I help other people do the same. She talked about the whistleblowers she'd protected, the cases she'd helped build, the prosecutions she'd facilitated, the people who'd kept their jobs and their reputations because someone had helped them fight back properly. I don't know if what I'm doing is perfect, she said. I don't know if I've made all the right choices, but I know I'm using everything I learned from being destroyed to make sure other people don't have to go through what I went through. The applause was sustained and genuine. Afterward, a young woman approached her, early 20s, nervous, carrying documents. Miss Carter? I think I found fraud at my company. I don't know what to do. Lena smiled. Tell me what you found. Because this was what came next. This was what all of it had been for. Not just surviving, not just rebuilding, but becoming someone who could help others survive and rebuild too. 1 year later, Lena stood on the same stage that had witnessed her transformation. The annual conference had become her tradition, a marker of who she'd been and who she was becoming. Adrian sat in the front row, as he had for the past 3 years. Marcus sat 3 rows back, still skeptical, but attending anyway. Marissa was in the audience recording on her phone. 4 years ago, Lena began, I walked into a gala expecting humiliation. Instead, I got visibility. I got a second chance I didn't ask for but desperately needed. I got the opportunity to remember who I was before the world tried to make me forget. She paused, looked out at 1,000 faces. I've spent these 4 years learning that you don't have to choose between principles and pragmatism, between doing good work and doing challenging work, between staying pure and staying effective. You just have to be willing to live with complexity and defend your choices even when they're uncomfortable. Lena's voice strengthened for the closing. I'm not the same person who reported fraud at Garrison Financial. I'm harder, more pragmatic, more willing to compromise when compromise serves the greater good. But I'm also stronger, more confident, more certain that I deserve to take up space in rooms that once tried to erase me. She looked directly at Adrian, then at Marcus, then at Marissa. I'm not perfect. My choices aren't always clear-cut. I work with people some consider morally questionable, and I make decisions that prioritize impact over ideological purity. But I've helped dozens of whistleblowers protect themselves while exposing corruption. I've stopped fraud that would have hurt thousands of people. I've built something that matters. The final words came from somewhere deep and true. 4 years ago, I thought being destroyed was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I know it was the beginning. Because I didn't just survive, I didn't just rebuild. I became someone who helps others do the same. And that's worth every compromise, every complicated choice, every moment of uncertainty. She smiled. Thank you for watching me grow. Thank you for giving me space to be imperfect while becoming who I needed to be. And thank you for reminding me that the woman they tried to bury didn't stay buried. She grew. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, on the terrace where everything had started, Lena found Adrian watching the city. 4 years, she said, joining him at the railing. 4 years, he agreed. Do you regret it? Inviting me to that gala, setting all this in motion? Adrian considered the question. Regret implies I'd choose differently with the same information. I wouldn't. The outcome has been exactly what I calculated. You calculated that I'd start a whistleblower protection firm? I calculated that you'd find your capacity and use it fully. The specific application was yours to determine. Lena laughed. You're still terrible at emotional honesty. I'm still excellent at accurate assessment. They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at a city that had destroyed Lena and then given her the tools to rebuild stronger. What happens now? Lena asked. Whatever you choose to happen, that's always been the answer. And for the first time in 4 years, Lena believed him. She didn't know if her choices were perfect, didn't know if she'd become exactly who she should be, didn't know if working with Adrian and compromising her ideals and choosing pragmatism over purity would look like wisdom or weakness in 10 years. But she knew she'd stopped apologizing for existing, stopped making herself small to make others comfortable, stopped believing that being destroyed meant staying broken. She'd grown from the grave they'd dug for her, and that was enough.